Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little darker. You find yourself deep beneath the Atlantic, inside the steel hull of a German U-boat in 1943. The war has turned against Germany, though the men here still cling to duty. This is U-96, a Type 7C submarine, 76 meters long, just large enough to carry 50 men, torpedoes, and barely enough food for weeks at sea. The air smells faintly of diesel, salt, and men who haven't breathed fresh air in days. Before we continue with this story, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Are you in bed trying to drift off, or perhaps studying late into the night? Drop a comment below and let me know your location. And if you enjoy these detailed historical journeys, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future stories. Now let's return to the cramped, humming corridor of U-96, where the patrol has just begun. It's the first day after departure from the port of Lorient on the French Atlantic coast. The concrete pens still echo in the crew's memory the clatter of wrenches, the barked orders of dock hands, and the heavy smell of oil and seawater. The men are in their early 20s, most of them veterans of previous patrols, their faces pale from the North Atlantic sun that never quite appears. The U-boat's cook, Obermatt Heinz Kluger, stands near the galley, if it can even be called that. The space is barely the size of a broom cupboard, wedged between the control room and the petty officer's quarters. His stove runs on compressed air and alcohol, a temperamental setup that can only be used when the boat is surfaced. One careless spark, and it could ignite the fumes that constantly hang in the air. Before the U-boat left port, dock workers and sailors loaded provisions into every possible corner of the boat. Canned goods, sacks of potatoes, smoked sausages, onions, loaves of black bread, tins of butter, and cases of eggs packed in sawdust, all crammed into the narrow spaces beneath bunks and alongside torpedo racks. Even the floorboards lift up to reveal small compartments filled with rations. The first days at sea are the most luxurious they will have. Fresh produce apples, cabbages, and turnips line the passageways in nets. Loaves of bread are stacked in the forward torpedo room, and strings of sausages hang from pipes above the men's heads. For the first few days, it's difficult to move anywhere without brushing against someone's food. The men joke about it. One mutters that they live inside a pantry with torpedoes. The crew of U-96 is divided into watches 6 hours on, 6 hours off, a rhythm that continues endlessly through day and night. There's no sunrise here, no sunset, only the pale glow of red lamps in the control room and the faint hum of the diesels when the boat runs surfaced. The cook works around these shifts, preparing meals for men who come and go at different hours, all sharing the same narrow table in the petty officer's mess. Breakfast is simple: black bread, tinned jam, and ersatz coffee brewed from roasted barley. Sugar is rationed, and real coffee is a rare treat. At midday, there might be pea soup or boiled potatoes with canned meat. Dinner is usually a repetition, sometimes a bit of cold sausage or pickled herring. During the first few days, though, spirits are high. The men still enjoy the small luxury of eggs fried on the alcohol stove, or thick slices of bread spread with real butter. The cook's job is constant motion. He chops onions on a tiny board, wipes sweat from his forehead, and steadies himself as the boat rocks gently with the Atlantic swell. The galley walls are lined with hooks and narrow shelves, each one labeled in careful handwriting: Kartoffeln, Zwiebeln, Fleischkonserven. Every square inch of space is used. There's a hierarchy to the meals. Officers eat slightly better than enlisted men, though all share the same basic ingredients. The captain, Kapitänleutnant Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock, often eats last, taking whatever is left after the men are served. In his small cabin, he eats from a metal tray while reviewing the ship's log. His quiet presence sets the tone. Discipline aboard is strict but not cruel. The men respect him. Outside the galley, the atmosphere is subdued. Conversations are hushed. Laughter is short-lived, swallowed by the steel hull and the ever-present vibration of machinery. The air grows warm quickly, even this early in the patrol. There is no air conditioning, and only a few small fans push around the heavy, oily air. When the boat dives, the heat builds rapidly, rising to over 30 degrees C in some compartments. Each man's bunk is shared in rotation, a practice known as hot bunking. When one sailor finishes his watch, he crawls into a bunk still warm from the previous occupant. The smell of sweat and diesel never leaves the fabric. Blankets are damp from condensation. And yet, to the exhausted men, it's comfort enough. On the second day, the crew begins to settle into their rhythm. The excitement of departure fades, replaced by the dull routine of life at sea. They are headed toward the western approaches, the hunting ground for Allied convoys between North America and Britain. The men know that soon, perhaps in a few days, the lookout will spot a faint line of smoke on the horizon. But for now, it's all waiting. The cook spends the morning making a thick soup, barley, potatoes, bits of tinned pork. He uses seawater mixed with fresh water to stretch the ration, a common practice when supplies are tight. When the meal is ready, he calls out down the narrow corridor, "Essen ist fertig!" Food's ready. The men queue silently, mess tins in hand. They eat, standing or crouched wherever space allows, the hum of engines filling every pause in conversation. As the hours pass, condensation drips from the ceiling pipes. It pools in corners and trickles down the walls. Bread, stored near the hull, begins to absorb moisture. After only a few days, mold will appear. But for now, the loaves are still good, the crust dark and firm, the inside heavy and dense. German bread is designed to last, though it cannot resist the damp forever. In the control room, the navigator marks their progress on a small chart table. The sound of the pencil scratching paper mingles with the rhythmic clicks of the hydrophone operator's headset. Every few hours, the captain walks through the boat, inspecting, nodding quietly. He pauses near the galley, asks the cook how the food holds up, and receives a polite but tired smile. In these early days, morale remains strong. The men still smell faint traces of the shore salt mixed with smoke and the memory of fresh air. They share stories of home, letters folded neatly in pockets, though no one reads them aloud. The cook sometimes hums a tune as he works a habit that fills the small galley with something like warmth. At night, the U-boat surfaces to recharge its batteries. The diesels roar to life, and a faint breeze filters through the open hatches. Some men climb topside for a few minutes of relief. The stars are vast and sharp, unbroken by city light. The cook joins them briefly, breathing deeply before returning below to prepare the next meal. His world is the galley, 4 walls of metal, a stove, and the endless repetition of chopping, stirring, and washing up. Every meal is a small act of defiance against monotony. The men measure time not by clocks, but by what the cook serves. Pea soup means midday, black bread means morning, canned stew means evening. Days blend together. The cook has learned to judge the morale of the boat by the leftovers. When the men eat everything, they're content. When they leave food behind, he knows the tension is rising. By the 4th day, the smell inside the U-boat has begun to change. The once fresh bread now carries a sour hint of damp. Onions begin to sprout in the warmth, their green shoots curling like small fingers. Butter softens and sweats inside its tins. The men notice it, but no one complains, not yet. They've all known worse. U-boats in 1943 faced grim odds. Allied aircraft now patrol the Atlantic more effectively, and radar-equipped destroyers prowl the convoys. Every time the boat surfaces, there's a risk of detection. But the crew has learned to adapt. They keep silent, work methodically, and focus on the small certainties: a meal, a cup of coffee, a brief laugh shared over a tin of preserved fruit. In the evenings, when the engine's quiet and the lights dim to red, the cook scrubs his pots in near darkness. The sound of metal on metal echoes faintly. He checks his stores, notes what must be used first, and ties down loose tins with cord so they won't rattle when the boat dives. The discipline of cleanliness is essential. A single spilled tin or rotting vegetable could spread a smell that never leaves. Sometimes, when the boat rides smoothly, he experiments adding a little mustard to the stew, or slicing sausages thinner to make them last longer. The men appreciate these small gestures. They joke that he performs miracles with nothing but salt and hot water. Then on the evening of the 5th day, The captain orders a dive. A lookout has spotted a distant aircraft silhouette against the low clouds. The hatches seal, the diesels fall silent, and the electric motors take over. Inside, the air grows still and heavy, moisture beads on every surface. The cook grips the counter as the boat angles downward. The world becomes sound. The slow creak of metal under pressure, the quiet beeping of depth gauges, the hum of motors. Somewhere aft, water drips steadily onto the deck. The cook wipes his forehead and glances at the loaf of bread on the shelf. Already, a faint bloom of mold spreads across its crust. He knows this is how it will be now, day after day. The air thicker, the food spoiling faster. The smell of diesel and sweat and onions blending into something the men will carry home in memory. As U-96 settles at depth, the lights dim once more to red. The cook steadies himself, takes a breath of the humid air, and opens a tin of potatoes. He knows it will be weeks before they see land again, and somewhere in the stillness, a single drop of condensation falls from the ceiling and lands in the pot below, a quiet reminder of how small the world has become beneath the waves. The dive has become routine now. Days blur into one another, marked not by sunrise or sunset, but by the rhythmic pulse of the engines and the faint hum of electric motors echoing through the hull. The men move quietly, conserving energy, conserving air. The sea presses against the steel skin of the U-boat with a constant, patient weight. Inside, the temperature climbs steadily, reaching close to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, hot, wet, and stifling. There is no real ventilation here. When the boat dives, all hatches close, sealing 50 men inside a metal tube that measures barely 7 meters from floor to ceiling. The air grows heavier hour by hour. The humidity makes every surface slick to the touch. Condensation drips from the pipes and bulkheads, forming small puddles that never quite dry. Clothing sticks to skin. Blankets stay damp no matter how they're aired. The smell a mixture of diesel fuel, unwashed bodies, and food slowly turning bad becomes a living thing, following every movement through the corridors. Meals are now the only change in rhythm, the small punctuation marks in an otherwise endless sentence of time. The cook, still patient and precise, works from habit. He measures out the remaining potatoes, checks the tins for rust, and wipes the walls with a rag soaked in vinegar to fight the smell of rot. His world is one of compromise. Too much heat to store butter, too much motion to keep pots from sliding, too little air to let a flame breathe properly. The alcohol stove, once steady, sputters and flares in the thick air. When the boat dives deep, the air pressure shifts, changing the way flames burn. Sometimes the cook must relight the stove several times just to boil a pot of water. At other times, he gives up and serves cold meals, tinned meat, hard biscuits, and lukewarm ersatz coffee brewed from roasted barley and chicory. Bread, once dark and solid, now grows pale patches of mold along its crust. The men pick around it quietly, careful not to complain. The cook cuts away what he can, saving the better pieces for the officers, though even they eat without comment. Butter has turned soft and sour, stored near the warm engine room. Milk, condensed and tinned, tastes metallic. Fresh eggs are gone now, eaten days ago. Flies appear, somehow surviving the sealed environment, drawn by the smell of food and sweat. They hover near the galley light, their buzzing lost beneath the constant low vibration of the motors. The noise never stops, the churning of the propeller shafts, the distant thrum of cooling pumps, the creak of metal expanding with the heat. Men learn to sleep through it, or not at all. In the forward compartment beside the torpedo tubes, a petty officer keeps watch over what remains of the bread supply. The loaves are wrapped in cloth to slow the spread of mold, but it's a losing battle. Some sailors recall cutting away grey spots with their knives, the rest still warm from their hands as they eat. The cook records it all carefully in his ration book, adjusting daily portions to stretch supplies as far as possible. The days at depth have a strange rhythm. 6 hours on watch, 6 hours off, repeated endlessly. There is no natural light, no sense of passing time. The men's internal clocks drift until they no longer know whether it's morning or night. Meals become the only reliable markers. Soup at midday, stew at dusk, coffee whenever possible. When the U-boat runs, surfaced at night to recharge its batteries, the cook rushes to prepare whatever requires open flame. The alcohol stove burns better with fresh air, and he uses the brief window to cook something warm. The men gather silently, waiting their turn to eat, each holding the same dented metal bowl and spoon they've carried since training. The food is simple but comforting. Dried potatoes reconstituted with water, small pieces of canned beef, a handful of onions if any remain every so often. A faint metallic bang echoes through the hull, torpedo doors shifting or ballast tanks adjusting. No one looks up. The sound is familiar, like a heartbeat. The cook moves slowly, steadying his pot with one hand and ladle with the other, as the boat tilts slightly to starboard. He's long since learned how to cook, while braced against motion. The air grows worse each day. Without ventilation, carbon dioxide builds up, making every breath feel heavier. The men sweat constantly, their clothes soaked, the air thick with moisture. Temperatures near the engine room can reach over 35 degrees Celsius. Water seeps into the bilges, and condensation gathers in the corners, running in slow streams along the deck. The U-boat has become a moving greenhouse, humid and alive with bacteria. In these conditions, the smallest tasks become labors. Washing dishes means wiping them with rags. There's not enough fresh water to rinse anything properly. Salt water corrodes metal, so it's used sparingly. Men drink condensed water collected from the engine cooling systems, metallic in taste, but better than thirst. Every drop is accounted for. Letters from home, kept in pockets or lockers, grow damp and soft. Photographs warp at the edges. A few men keep their papers in tins meant for tobacco, wrapped in oilcloth, to protect them from the damp. The cook keeps his ration log in a sealed folder, its ink smudged from the moisture. Personal diaries from survivors of boats like U-96 describe these conditions in detail. One sailor wrote that the smell never leaves your clothes, even after weeks ashore. Another recalled scraping mold from bread with a pocket knife and saying nothing. Complaining was pointless. Everyone was living the same discomfort. Occasionally, when the U-boat surfaces, the men open the hatches for a brief exchange of air. The rush of wind through the compartments feels like a miracle, but the relief is short-lived. Within hours of diving again, the heat returns, heavier than before. Ersatz coffee becomes the crew's greatest comfort. It is weak, bitter, and tastes faintly of smoke, but it gives the illusion of normalcy. The cook brews it in large enamel pots, careful not to waste fuel. Men sip it slowly, eyes half closed, letting the familiar warmth cut through the stale air. Cigarettes are equally precious. Many have run out by now, and the smell of a single lit match draws attention from every corner of the boat. The cook himself eats last, if at all. His meals are scraps left after everyone else has taken theirs. He doesn't mind. He says it helps him judge how long the food will last. He's developed a sixth sense for spoilage tapping tins, smelling lids, judging whether a potato is still good by the feel of its skin. Each decision matters. A single spoiled tin could sicken half the crew, and there are no replacements here. The boat's routine is mechanical. Men eat, stand watch, sleep, repeat. The hum of machinery replaces the passage of time. Even conversation slows, reduced to nods and short replies. There's nothing new to say. Days at depth are lived in small details, the drip of condensation, the scrape of a spoon, the smell of oil and rust. In one quiet hour, when the engines are running slow and the sea outside is calm, the cook opens the bread locker again. The air that escapes is warm and sour. He knows before he even looks. The loaves are soft and slick, covered in a thin layer of green mold. Some have turned completely, their crusts collapsing inward. He works carefully, cutting away what can be saved. From somewhere forward, a sailor's low laugh drifts back, humor born of exhaustion. Someone jokes that the bread looks like it's growing new life. No one answers. The cook keeps working, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. He knows this is only the beginning. Days later, even the canned goods begin to fail. Rust spots bloom along the seams. The labels, soaked with moisture, peel away. The The cook has started marking them with pencil: beef, stew, vegetables, though sometimes he guesses wrong. The men no longer care what's in their bowl, only that it's warm. The rhythm continues. 6 hours on, 6 hours off. The same meals, the same smells, the same walls closing in. The sea outside is endless, indifferent. The U-boat moves unseen beneath it, a small, sweating pocket of life in a cold ocean. One evening, the cook sits beside his stove, rubbing at a headache brought on by the air. He opens another loaf of bread. At first it looks better, less mold, firmer crust. But as he turns it over in the dim red light, he sees small white threads moving across the surface. He freezes for a moment, staring. Then, without a word, he fetches his knife. Carefully, he slices away the worst parts, sweeping the small creatures into a rag. He wipes the blade, then continues cutting, salvaging what he can. There's no replacement. This is all they have left. When the meal is served, no one asks questions. The men eat silently, the sound of their spoons blending with the hum of the engines and the creak of the hull. The cook watches them for a moment, then turns back to his work. In the dim light, the air thick with heat and the smell of tinned stew, he realizes the truth every U-boat crewman comes to know. Beneath the ocean, survival isn't a matter of bravery or battle. It's endurance, quiet, persistent, and measured one mouthful at a time. The weeks have stretched thin now, an unbroken rhythm of diving and surfacing, of silence and mechanical noise. The men no longer measure time by hours or days, but by the slow disappearance of food and the steady fatigue in their bodies. Then one morning, a subtle change ripples through the boat. Orders pass quietly along the compartments. The patrol is ending. U-96 is turning home. They have spent almost 8 weeks at sea. The once crisp uniforms are damp, faded with salt and sweat. The air inside the submarine has grown so stale that each breath feels thick, heavy with carbon dioxide. The men's eyes burn from the constant lack of fresh air. When the captain gives the order to surface, there is no cheer, only quiet relief. The diesels roar to life, and the U-boat rises slowly toward the surface of the Atlantic. At first, nothing changes, only the hum of machinery and the creak of metal under pressure. Then, with a shudder, the boat breaks through the water. The hatches swing open, and a rush of cold, clean air floods downward. It is the first real breath they have taken in nearly 2 months. Men climb quickly to the conning tower, squinting into the light. The sea is grey and calm, stretching endlessly to the horizon. Some of them simply stand there, eyes closed, faces turned upward to the wind. Others smile faintly, not from joy but from relief. For the first time in weeks, the air carries no smell of oil or sweat or mold, only salt and wind. Below decks, the cook stays at his post. He has grown thinner, his hands rough from heat and salt. Around him, the galley looks the same as it always has, a narrow space of metal and pipes. But now it bears the marks of the patrol. Every surface is stained, every pot scratched, every tin dented. The walls are slick with grease and condensation. The smell of old food lingers in the corners, mixed with the faint, sour tang of spoiled butter. His first task after surfacing is cleaning. The stove, the counters, the storage lockers, everything must be scrubbed down. It's a ritual of sorts, one shared by every U-boat cook returning from patrol. He fills a basin with seawater, adds vinegar from the stores, and begins wiping every surface. The rags come away brown and greasy. When he lifts a floorboard to check the storage space beneath, a gust of rancid air escapes. The last of the potatoes have rotted completely. He closes it again, quietly. The men begin to move differently now. There's a sense of anticipation in the air, muted but unmistakable. They talk about the harbour, about Lorient, about what they'll eat first when they reach land. Someone mentions fresh bread. Another says beer. The cook listens, smiling to himself. Meals during the final days of the patrol are the simplest of all. The last tins of meat, the last bag of dried peas, the final crumbs of bread, too mouldy to salvage. He boils everything into a single thick stew. It isn't pleasant, but it's warm, and it fills the men's stomachs. That's all that matters now. The captain spends more time on the bridge as they near the Bay of Biscay. The threat of Allied aircraft is constant. Even in the final hours, danger remains. But luck is with them. The U-boat slips through the grey water undetected, the French coast gradually appearing on the horizon. When they finally enter the concrete pens at Lorient, the light changes dim again, but different. It's the light of safety. Dock workers appear, waving, lines are thrown, and the U-boat eases into its berth. The engines fall silent for the first time in weeks. The stillness is startling. The men begin to disembark, some limping, some laughing quietly. Their uniforms are stiff with salt, their faces drawn but alive. Nurses and naval officers wait at the dock with clipboards. Medical inspections, brief interviews, then a bus ride to the barracks. But before any of that, there's the ritual, the first meal ashore. Inside the base canteen, tables are laid with bread, butter, cheese, and hot soup. For men who've lived on tinned meat and stale biscuits, the sight is almost overwhelming. They sit awkwardly at first, hands resting on real wooden tables. Then they eat slowly at first, then faster, until the plates are clean. The soup is thin, but the bread is soft, the butter cool and fresh. One sailor laughs through a mouthful, saying it tastes like heaven. Another just stares at his plate, silent. The cook sits apart, eating quietly. For the first time in weeks, he tastes food he didn't have to make himself. The soup is simple barley and vegetables, but to him, it's a feast. He can still feel the roll of the boat beneath his feet, the phantom motion of the sea. Even here on land, it seems to move with him. Later, he walks back to the dock. U-96 sits silent now, her deck wet from the spray. The galley is empty. He steps inside one last time, carrying a bucket of hot water and soap. The final cleaning begins. He wipes down the stove, polishes the pots, scrubs the walls until they shine faintly in the light. This ritual, too, is a kind of respect for the ship, for the men, for the work done here. The process of decontamination is methodical. Air hoses are fitted into the hatches, blowing fresh air through the compartments for hours. Engineers check the filters, the engines, the battery cells. Every space is washed with disinfectant. Mold is scraped from the walls. It's all standard procedure, but to those who have lived through it, it feels almost ceremonial, the closing of a chapter. In the days that follow, the crew rest. Some receive commendations, others simply sleep. They write letters home, spend their pay in the canteens, drink beer in the bars of Lorient. But there is always the awareness, quiet, unspoken, that not every crew is so lucky. By 1943, the statistics are grim. Of all German U-boat crews who sailed that year, more than 70% would not return. Entire submarines disappeared without trace, swallowed by the Atlantic. Some men survived a single patrol. Others completed 5 or 6 before their luck ran out. The average lifespan of a U-boat crewman was measured not in years, but in missions. The cook knows this better than anyone. He's seen the empty berths in the barracks, the faces that never return from patrol. He's heard the news whispered over coffee, another boat overdue, another crew listed as missing. Yet he continues each voyage repeating the same routines, loading food, cooking, rationing, cleaning. There's no glory in his work, but there's purpose. He feeds the men who faced the sea. When asked years later about life aboard a U-boat, survivors often mention the food. Not the battles, not the torpedoes or the fear, but the meals, the taste of pea soup at depth, the smell of frying onions mixed with diesel, the sound of spoons clinking against metal bowls. These memories endure because they were constant, ordinary moments in an otherwise extraordinary ordeal. One sailor from U-552 recalled that the smell of cooking was the only thing that reminded us we were still alive. Another said that the cook was the quietest man aboard, but the one everyone trusted most. His work never stopped, even when the engines failed or the air grew foul. In a world of silence and pressure, his ladle scraping the bottom of a pot was a small, steady reassurance. In Lorient, when the crew gathers for their final debriefing, the cook receives no medal, no formal recognition. His name appears only once in the patrol log beside a note about supplies consumed. Yet among the men, his importance is understood. Without him, they would not have endured. Before the next patrol, the boat will be restocked again. Crates of new bread, barrels of fresh water, sacks of potatoes, tins of meat and butter will fill every space once more. The cycle will repeat. But for now, there is peace, a brief, fragile peace between voyages. In the quiet of the dock, the cook stands beside the open hatch, watching the last of the cleaning water drain away. The air smells of salt and detergent, sharp and clean. Somewhere nearby, a bell rings from another boat preparing to depart. He listens for a moment, then turns away. Years later, when the war is over and the pens at Lorient lie empty, veterans will speak of these moments with a strange tenderness. The claustrophobia, the heat, the endless damp, all of it recedes in memory. What remains are the small things. The first breath of air after surfacing, the taste of real bread after weeks of rationing, the sound of waves against the hull as the boat rests in harbour, and, for the cook, who spent his war surrounded by steam, smoke and silence, one memory endures above all others, the feel of a loaf of bread still warm from the oven, the simple weight of it in his hands. In hindsight, even that single slice of fresh bread becomes more than food. It becomes a symbol of survival, of patience, of life preserved against the odds beneath the dark Atlantic waves. It's early morning in 1942, and you are aboard HMS Bluebell, a Flower-class corvette assigned to convoy escort duty in the North Atlantic. The ship is small, just over 200 feet long, built quickly in a Scottish shipyard, and designed to do one thing: protect merchant convoys from German U-boats. She rolls easily even in calm seas, her narrow hull rising and falling like a cork. Every loose object rattles with each motion. The air smells of oil, salt, and iron. You've been at sea for 11 days. The routine never changes. 4 hours on watch, 4 hours off, 24 hours a day. The watch bill is unending, cutting time into neat, exhausting pieces. Sleep comes in fragments, meals in haste, and conversation in half-sentences shouted over the noise of the engines. The corvette's engines rumble constantly, a slow, deep vibration that travels through the metal deck and into your bones. Above deck, the wind cuts through layers of wool and salt-stiffened fabric. Below, in the mess decks, the air is heavy with dampness condensation dripping from the overhead pipes. Hammocks swaying gently with the ship's motion. The walls sweat in the cold, the floor slick with seawater that seeps through even the tightest seams. It is not a glamorous ship. The Flower-class corvettes were built quickly and cheaply, their hulls patterned after whaling vessels. Their job is simple: stay with the convoy, keep watch, and respond if an enemy submarine is detected. Life aboard is built on routine, endless, necessary, monotonous routine. The 4-hour watch system is the heart of this rhythm. Each man belongs to a watch, port or starboard. When one is on duty, the other rests. At the end of each period, the ship's bell strikes to mark the change. The new watch climbs to the deck, faces stung by cold spray, while the off-duty men stumble below, boots dripping, eager to collapse into their hammocks. There's no true day or night. The pattern repeats regardless of hour. Meals fit around this schedule. The ship's cook, a tired man with a permanent smear of grease on his sleeve, works in a galley barely larger than a cupboard. He prepares food for nearly 100 men using coal-fired stoves that shift and tilt with the sea. The menu rarely changes: tinned mutton stew, powdered potatoes, boiled cabbage, and endless tea. Sometimes there's hardtack biscuits or a few slices of bread. If the humidity hasn't spoiled them, tea is constant. It's poured strong and dark into chipped enamel mugs, drunk at every hour of the day. Sugar is rationed, milk is powdered, but no one complains. Tea is warmth. Tea is normalcy. It's what keeps men awake through the small hours of the morning, staring into mist and darkness, scanning the waves for the faint shadow of a periscope. The mess deck below is a world unto itself. It's the only place that could be called home during these long patrols. Hammocks hang in close rows, so tight that when one man turns in his sleep, his elbow brushes his neighbor's side. There's no privacy, only proximity. Boots are hung by their laces from the overhead to keep them dry, though they rarely are. The sound of water sloshing in the bilges is constant. At meal times, the mess deck comes alive. The smell of tinned stew fills the air. Mingled with the scent of damp wool and tobacco smoke, men eat from the same tin bowls, sitting on lockers or leaning against bulkheads. Conversation drifts between topics: the weather, the convoy's speed, home. Some men read letters when the sea is calm enough. Others stare at the deck, spoon in hand, too tired to speak. Condensation drips from the pipes overhead, sometimes right into their bowls. No one bothers to move. It's just part of life here. The walls are so wet with moisture that patches of rust bloom like moss. The constant damp makes everything smell faintly of metal and mildew. Socks never dry. Clothes stay clammy no matter how close they're hung to the galley stove. The ship's movement never stops. Even in moderate weather, the Bluebell pitches and rolls through the waves, its bow plunging deep before rising again in a shower of spray. Sleep is a struggle. Hammocks sway wildly, and the sound of boots running across the deck above keeps you half awake. Men learn to wedge themselves into the canvas, one arm hooked around the edge to keep from being thrown out. When the bell rings for the next watch, it's almost a relief. You pull on your stiff uniform, button the heavy duffel coat, and climb the ladder to the open deck. The cold hits instantly. The wind tastes of salt and iron. The sea stretches out in every direction. Grey upon grey, the horizon lost in mist. Somewhere ahead, the convoy plods onward, a line of merchant ships spaced by precise intervals, their decks piled high with cargo bound for Britain. Tankers, freighters, troop ships, all vital, all vulnerable. The corvettes and destroyers form a screen around them, small dots of movement against the expanse of ocean. On watch, you stand at your post near the bridge, eyes fixed on the water. The sea is hypnotic. The constant motion dulls thought. Minutes blur into hours. Occasionally, the officer of the watch passes by, murmuring brief instructions. The lookouts call out bearings at regular intervals, voices flap from repetition. Nothing in sight to port, nothing to starboard. The routine rarely breaks. There is no enemy in view, no sudden drama, just wind, waves, and the endless noise of the ship. You check instruments, wipe condensation from the lenses, adjust your scarf, and keep looking. The sea demands patience more than courage. Below deck, between watches, life continues in small rituals. Men repair their gear, patch torn uniforms, play cards when the table stays dry long enough. There's always someone writing a letter by the weak light of a bulkhead lamp. The letters are short, careful, mostly about the weather, the food, small comforts. No one writes about fear or boredom. Those are understood. Bathing is rare. The ship carries limited fresh water, reserved mostly for drinking and cooking. Men wash their faces with seawater or wipe down with damp cloths. Shaving is a luxury, often skipped. After weeks at sea, everyone carries the same scent, oil, sweat, and salt. The sound never stops. The corvette's propellers thrum like a heartbeat, steady and slow. The ship's hull creaks with every wave. The wind howls through rigging, slamming doors and whistling through vents. Sometimes, when the weather worsens, the sound becomes a roar, a physical thing that drowns out thought. In those moments, the ship feels alive, straining against the weight of the ocean. Meals arrive when they can. The cook serves portions into dented tins, ladling out steaming mutton stew that smells faintly of iron and grease. The potatoes are powdered, the vegetables few, but the food is hot, and that's what matters. Men eat quickly, balancing bowls on their knees, spoons clinking with the rhythm of the waves. Between action stations, there's little to do but wait. Maintenance tasks fill the hours, scraping rust, painting decks, checking lines. The officers insist on constant upkeep, knowing that routine keeps men sharp, but the monotony presses in all the same. The mind drifts. You think about land, about warmth, about silence. At night, the convoy becomes a ghostly procession. Lights are blacked out, the ships moving in darkness, each one following the faint phosphorescence of the wake ahead. The stars above are cold and distant. The sea glows faintly where it breaks, a pale shimmer on black water. You stand your watch, the wind biting through your coat, and listen to the steady beat of the engines. Sometimes there's music in the mess, a gramophone record playing softly, the needle scratching with each pitch of the ship. The sound mixes with laughter, a few voices singing along. It's not loud enough to drown the ocean, but it reminds everyone of something beyond it. The corvette moves with the convoy, hour after hour, day after day. The logbook fills with identical entries: position, weather, convoy speed, no contact. The monotony is the mission. To stay alert despite the boredom is its own kind of courage. Then, one afternoon, the calm is broken. You're below deck, halfway through a cup of tea, when the tannoy crackles to life. A sharp voice cuts through the background noise. From the bridge comes a single, urgent command, the word every sailor dreads and expects in equal measure. Contact. The word echoes down the narrow passageways, repeated from man to man. Cups are set aside. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Boots strike the deck as men move to their stations. Somewhere above, the ASDIC operator, the sonar man, has picked up a faint echo beneath the waves. The monotony shatters, replaced by focus. For now, there's no certainty of danger, only the possibility of it. But everyone feels the change, the pulse quickening, the mind sharpening. Somewhere out there, in the grey depths beneath the convoy, a shape is moving. The word contact fades into silence. Whatever faint echo the ASDIC operator heard has slipped away into the vastness below. The tension eases, but not completely. On the Bluebell, the men return to their routines, each movement slower now, more deliberate. This is the way of convoy duty moments of intensity surrounded by long, grey hours of nothingness. The sea stretches endlessly in all directions. An unbroken expanse of slate-coloured water beneath an equally grey sky. The days blend into one another, the weather rarely changing. Sometimes rain drifts in fine sheets across the deck, soaking everything in moments. Other times mist rolls low, blurring the horizon until ship and sea become one dull mass. Even in calm conditions, the dampness seeps into every surface, every thread of clothing. The rhythm of life aboard the Bluebell is one of repetition. Duties begin again as soon as they end, scrubbing decks, checking lines, polishing brass, cleaning guns. Maintenance is constant because salt and moisture corrode everything. Paint peels, bolts rust, rope stiffens. The men scrape, oil, and tighten with quiet efficiency, knowing that if they stop, the sea will reclaim the ship inch by inch. Meals are signalled by the galley bell. The cook serves from a steaming pot that never seems to empty. It's stew again, as it always is, a thick mixture of tinned mutton, powdered potatoes, and whatever vegetables can survive the damp. The men call it mystery meat, though everyone knows what it really is. The same ingredients appear every day, rearranged in slightly different proportions. No one expects variety. They eat quickly, sitting shoulder to shoulder in the mess deck, spoons clinking against metal bowls. Steam rises and condenses on the ceiling above, dripping back down in slow drops. Someone always mutters the same joke back aboard HMS Greasepot, and someone else answers with a low laugh. The humour is thin but necessary. Between watches, there's a kind of suspended existence. Men sleep when they can, in hammocks that sway gently with the motion of the sea. Others write in small notebooks, recording times, temperatures, and thoughts too mundane to be remembered. Some smoke, the tobacco thick and harsh, filling the confined space with a blue haze. The cook's domain is a small miracle of endurance. The galley stove burns unevenly, and the rolling of the ship threatens to spill every pot. He braces himself with one arm while stirring with the other, the ladle clattering against dented sides. Fresh food is a luxury long gone within the first week. Everything now comes from tins: meat, vegetables, milk, fruit. The labels have long peeled away, so each meal begins with a small gamble. Sometimes it's stew, sometimes it's beans. Occasionally, if luck holds, it's peaches in syrup, a treasure worth sharing. Tea remains the anchor of the day. Strong, dark, and bitter, brewed in great pots and poured into enamel mugs chipped from use. It's drunk in silence or in soft conversation, sometimes with a biscuit if any are left. The act of holding a warm mug against cold fingers becomes a ritual of comfort. one of the few moments that feel human amid the mechanical routine. When the seas are calm, the men gather near the galley hatch for their tea, standing in small groups, coats buttoned high against the wind. They talk about football, home, the food they'll eat on shore, topics repeated so often they become mantras. The repetition doesn't matter. It's the talking that keeps them steady. Humour becomes the most valuable currency aboard. Small jokes about the weather, the stew, or the endless damp circulate endlessly. Someone paints Bluebell Cafe on a scrap of board and nails it above the galley hatch. Another man, gifted with a harmonica, plays snatches of songs between shifts. The tunes drift through the corridors, mixing with the hum of the engines and the groan of the sea. Every so often, a game of cards appears, played on an upturned crate, coins or scraps of paper serving as stakes. Betting pools are organized on everything imaginable: the next sighting of a ship, the next break in the weather, even the identity of the next meal from the galley. It's not about winning. It's about passing time, one laugh at a time. The monotony wears differently on each man. Some retreat into silence, staring into space for long stretches, lips moving slightly as if counting waves. Others fill every moment with small activity, cleaning rifles, polishing boots, folding the same shirt again and again. The repetition becomes a way to stay sane. Above deck, the world never changes. The horizon remains empty, the color of wet iron. Gulls follow the convoy for a while, then vanish into mist. The wind shifts without warning, bringing sprays of cold water that sting the face. The sea smells of oil and salt. The ship groans as it cuts through wave after wave. Inside, everything is damp. Clothes cling to the skin. Blankets feel perpetually wet. The smell of oil and human breath fills every compartment. Condensation drips from the ceiling pipes like rain, pattering onto the floor in slow rhythm. In the corners of the mess deck, small puddles form that never dry. The men grow used to the constant moisture, to the feeling that the ship itself is sweating with them. Sleep is brief and shallow. Hammocks swing in tight rows, and every movement of the sea translates into motion. Men dream of solid ground, of stillness, but wake to the same creaking rhythm. The air is thick with snoring, the rustle of clothing, the occasional cough. The clocks on the bulkhead mark each passing hour with mechanical precision. Indifferent to fatigue, the ship's officers keep order through quiet persistence. Routine is everything. Inspections are held daily, equipment checked, reports written. The smallest deviation from schedule could mean disaster if the convoy is attacked. The men know this, and they comply without complaint. It's easier to obey the clock than to think about the endless miles of grey ocean surrounding them. Occasionally, a signal arrives from another escort weather update. Course corrections, brief bursts of Morse light across the waves. The messages are short, impersonal, but even those few words remind the crew they're not alone. There are other ships out there, fighting the same boredom, the same fatigue. The monotony is broken only by the weather. A gale sweeps through suddenly, waves crashing over the bow, drenching the deck crew in icy spray. The ship heaves and groans, rolling hard to port, then to starboard. Everything loose must be tied down: pots, tools, even boots. Men grip the railings, soaked and half blind, shouting to be heard over the roar. Then, just as quickly, the sea calms again, leaving silence behind. In the mess that follows, the cook serves stew as always. The men eat standing up, the ship still rocking gently beneath their feet. Someone jokes that the sea is trying to season the soup for them. Another raises his spoon in mock salute and says, "Here's to another fine day in paradise." Laughter ripples through the compartment, brief but genuine. As evening comes, the light fades from grey to darker grey, then to black. The lamps are dimmed for blackout, the convoy invisible against the night. Only the faint glow of the compass light remains, casting a soft circle of illumination on the bridge. The sea itself turns to glass, smooth, dark, and endless. The men gather for one last tea break before the next watch. The mugs are warm, the tea lukewarm. No one complains. They stand in silence, staring at the faint outlines of ships ahead and astern. The engines thrum steadily beneath their feet. Somewhere below, the cook cleans his pots again, preparing to start over in a few hours. The ocean stretches endlessly around them, patient and unchanging. Another day done, another one waiting beyond it, indistinguishable except for the slow passage of time and the quiet endurance of those who keep watch. As the last man drains his mug and sets it down, the sound of it echoes softly in the still air. Tomorrow will be the same sea, the same sky, the same lukewarm tea. And yet they will rise and do it all again, without complaint, because this is what it means to endure the Atlantic, to face the same grey horizon every day and find, somehow, the will to keep going. The convoy has been at sea for nearly 3 weeks. Each morning looks the same grey sky, grey water, grey faces half hidden beneath layers of salt-stiffened clothing. And one day, something changes. A faint line appears on the horizon, darker than the cloud above it. Land, Britain. For the crew of HMS Bluebell, the sight brings no cheering, only quiet relief. The men have learned that excitement wastes energy. They stand at their posts, watching the coastline grow from a smudge to a shape until the first gulls appear, wheeling lazily above the masts. Home is close now. The ship keeps her station until the last merchant vessel reaches the safety of the harbour channel. Only then does the corvette turn toward Liverpool, engines humming at a steadier pitch. The wind smells different, Hearless Raw, carrying traces of coal smoke and land. For days they have tasted only salt. Now there is a faint sweetness in the air. Below deck, the cook scrubs the last of the pots. The stew is finished, the tins empty, the tea leaves used twice over. He wipes condensation from the walls and stows his pans with quiet satisfaction. The galley feels larger now that the steam has cleared. There is space to breathe. As the ship nears the Mersey, tugs appears more, black silhouettes guiding them through muddy water. The great cranes of the docks loom ahead, frozen in silhouette against the dawn light. The harbour smells of oil, rust, and damp wood. After the open sea, even this feels welcoming. The engines slow, then stop. The silence that follows is startling. For weeks, the constant vibration has been part of life, a background pulse that never ceased. Now without it, the ship seems hollow, as though time itself has paused. The men move more slowly, as if unsure of their balance on still water. Lines are thrown. The Bluebell eases against the dock. Gangways creak into place. The men begin to disembark, some limping from the roll of the ship, some blinking against the brightness of the morning. Shore leave awaits, though not immediately. First come inspections, reports, and 1,000 small tasks. Supplies are tallied. How many depth charges remain? How many rounds of ammunition? How many tins of meat consumed? The cook hands over his inventory with neat handwriting and stained fingers. Engineers open hatches, check valves, scrape rust. Every smell of the sea must be purged before the next voyage. Refueling begins, hoses snaking across the deck, the tang of diesel filling the air. New crates of provisions arrive on the dock. Flour, potatoes, onions, barrels of fresh water, tins stacked in neat pyramids. The men glance at them without much interest. They know these same supplies will soon replace the ones they've just finished, starting the cycle again. Only after the captain signs the papers are they dismissed. Some head straight to the dockside canteen, others to letters waiting in the post office. Mail is a kind of lifeline, words from home, arriving weeks late, but precious nonetheless. Most letters are read in silence, folded carefully, and tucked into breast pockets. The men seldom speak of what they read, they simply carry the words with them. The canteen serves food that seems impossibly rich. Eggs fried in real butter, thick slices of bread still warm from the oven, mugs of strong tea with real milk. The men eat slowly, as though afraid the taste might vanish if they rush. One sailor says nothing, just stares at the bread before taking a bite. For the first time in weeks, the texture is soft, not hard or damp. It crumbles between his fingers. He smiles faintly. Fatigue runs deeper than hunger. It's not the exhaustion of work, but of constant tension, the kind that builds quietly, day after day, as the sea offers no rest. Even in sleep, They listened for alarms, for the shift in the ship's motion that meant danger. Now in harbour, they find the silence almost unnerving. Some wake at night to phantom noises, convinced the ship is still rolling. Over pints in the dockside pub, conversation is gentle, halting. They talk about the weather, the repairs, the next posting. No one mentions fear. They joke about the stew, about the endless tea, about the damp that clings to everything. Laughter comes easily but fades quickly. Each man knows how close they came to never returning. Letters home describe the voyage in modest terms. Sea rough but manageable, food tolerable, all well. No one writes about the endless grey, or the nights spent staring into darkness, waiting for a sound that might mean death. Those memories stay at sea. When the ship's stores are replenished, the next crew will come aboard. Some old faces, some new. The Bluebell herself bears the scars of the journey, chipped paint, rusted seams, dents along the hull where waves struck hardest. Yet she floats steady, ready to sail again. In a nearby dock, another escort prepares for departure. Across the water, merchant ships load cargo for yet another convoy. The war doesn't pause, it simply turns in quiet cycles of departure and return. The men of the Bluebell sometimes think of the German submariners who hunt them. They imagine those crews living for weeks beneath the waves, sealed away from air and light. The thought brings no hatred, only a weary kind of respect. Both sides fight the same enemy, the sea itself. Both live with dampness, monotony, and hunger. Both measure time in watches and meals. When night falls over the docks, the lights reflect on still water, shimmering lines broken by the slow ripple of passing tugs. The city beyond hums faintly, a reminder of the world they protect. The sailors of the Bluebell sit on the quay, mugs of tea cradled in their hands, talking quietly. The warmth seeps into their palms, easing the chill that the sea has left behind. For a moment, they are simply men again, not sailors, not guardians of convoys, but ordinary souls watching the tide. The stars above are faint, dulled by the glow of the city, but the rhythm of the water feels familiar like breathing. Tomorrow will bring new orders. Another convoy, another ocean crossing, another stretch of grey days and grey food. The men know this. Yet none complain. Routine has become their shield, the sameness a kind of comfort. As one sailor finishes his tea, he looks out across the harbour where the lights flicker on the water. The noise of the city drifts faintly across the docks, distant laughter, a whistle, the rumble of trains. He realizes in that quiet moment how small the difference is between safety and danger, between monotony and survival. It isn't medals or victories that matter here. It's endurance, the ability to keep going day after day through cold, damp, and weariness. It's the knowledge that as long as the ship floats and the men are fed, the convoy moves forward. That is the measure of success. He takes one last sip, the tea gone lukewarm but still comforting, and sets the mug beside him. Around him, the other sailors talk softly, their words blending with the sound of the tide against the dock. The smell of salt and coal smoke fills the air. Tomorrow, they will do it all again. Because at sea, survival isn't about heroism, it's about patience, about sharing one more meal, one more watch, one more day of grey skies and grey water. It's about the quiet conviction that for now, this moment of stillness and the warmth of a simple cup of tea is enough. And as he stands to leave, the thought settles gently, like mist over the harbour. In the end, survival itself and the next warm meal are all that truly matter at sea. It's 3:14 in the morning, spring of 1944, at RAF Horsham St Faith in Norfolk, England. The air is damp and heavy with mist, the kind that clings to every surface and muffles sound. Across the airfield, the outline of parked bombers glimmers faintly under low floodlights. Their long wings stretch over puddled tarmac, dark shapes against a faint, colourless dawn. You can hear engines coughing as ground crews test them, a low mechanical growl that carries through the fog. Inside the barracks, an alarm bell rings, soft but insistent. Another mission day has begun. Men stir in their bunks, muttering, reaching for clothing laid out the night before. Wool shirts, flight jackets, thick trousers lined with fleece. The temperature outside is barely above freezing, and at 30,000 feet it will drop to 40 below. A few men speak quietly, trading short jokes that sound more like habits than conversation. Every word carries the weight of routine. They've done this dozens of times, and still no one gets used to it. They shuffle through the narrow corridor, toward the mess hall, where the smell of coffee cuts through the cold. The light is yellow, soft, humming from the ceiling fixtures. Steam rises from metal trays of food, powdered eggs, canned bacon, and toast, thick with margarine. It's not much, but it's warm, and at this hour that's enough. Men line up with tin plates, eyes half closed, some still buttoning their jackets as they wait. At one table sits the pilot, Captain James Walker, a 24-year-old from Ohio. Next to him, the navigator, First Lieutenant Robert Mills, folds a small piece of paper over and over, a habit he's had since training. The others drifting co-pilot, bombardier, radio operator, Gunnerston men in all. They eat slowly, chewing mechanically, the taste secondary to the need for calories. Outside, the engines of a fuel truck rumble past, shaking the windows slightly. On mornings like this, conversation is minimal. Most men prefer silence. Some stare into their mugs of strong, black coffee. Others read the chalkboard on the far wall, where the day's menu is scrawled beside the words, "Briefing at 0400. No one talks about targets. They'll learn that soon enough. Still, small rituals persist. One man sprinkles a pinch of salt into his coffee for luck. Another lines up 3 sugar cubes, takes one, and leaves the rest untouched. The engineer wears the same wool cap he's worn on every mission since Italy, despite the frayed brim. Superstitions like these fill the air, quiet but real, the invisible, fabric of belief that keeps men steady when reason fails. By 3:45, the mess hall begins to empty. Plates clatter into metal tubs, mugs are drained. The men move toward the operations building, shoulders hunched against the cold. The grass glitters faintly under frost. In the distance, a jeep moves along the flight line, its headlights cutting through fog. Inside the briefing room, the air is warmer but tense. Maps cover the front wall, pins marking routes across occupied Europe. A curtain conceals part of the board, waiting for the morning reveal. The crew find their usual seats on hard wooden benches. The smell of damp wool, tobacco, and coffee hangs thick in the air. The door closes, and the chatter dies. A major steps to the front, clipboard in hand. "Good morning, gentlemen," he says, his voice even. "Target today is Brunswick." There's a faint rustle in the room. Brunswick means a long flight, 6 hours each way, and heavy flak. No one groans aloud, but shoulders shift, and one man exhales quietly through his teeth. The briefing continues. Altitudes, coordinates, weather reports, enemy positions. The words come steadily, filling the room like static. The navigator copies notes into a small notebook, his handwriting neat and deliberate. The bombardier marks target zones on his chart. Behind them, someone stifles a cough. At the back of the room, a metal coffee urn steams quietly, untouched. When the lights dim for the final slide, a photograph of the target area, everyone stares. The black and white image shows a city blurred by cloud, with rivers, roads, and railway yards marked in red pencil. The major explains wind direction, bomb load, return route. It's the same process every time, but each mission feels heavier than the last. The odds of survival, statistically, are still less than half for those who've flown more than 20 missions. Everyone knows it, but no one says it aloud. At 4:30, the briefing ends. The crews stand, stretch, and move toward the equipment room. Each man collects his gear, parachute harness, Mae West life vest, flak jacket, oxygen mask, gloves, and the bulky heated flight suit. The weight of it,
all is immense, more than 40 pounds before weapons are added.
They dress in silence, fastening straps and checking each other's buckles. The hiss of oxygen bottles being tested fills the room. Outside, the bombers wait in a neat line, their olive-drab fuselages gleaming faintly under the lights. Each one bears a name painted near the nose: Lucky Lady, Sugar's Baby, Miss Liberty. The nose art is bright but chipped from cold and wear. Ground crews move among them with purpose, loading bombs into the open bays, checking fuel lines, wiping frost from canopies. The B-24 Liberator is not a graceful aircraft. It's boxy with a high wing and wide fuselage, but it can carry a heavy load up to 8,000 pounds of bomb sand fly long distances. Its 4 engines, Pratt and Whitney R1830s, produce the deep, resonant hum that fills the airfield now. Each engine will burn nearly 2,000 gallons of fuel before the crew returns. The pilot and co-pilot walk slowly toward their aircraft, boots crunching on frost. The air smells of gasoline, oil and metal. Mechanics nod as they pass, hands already black with grease. The gunners check their turrets, running gloved fingers along the barrels of their 50 caliber Brownings. The navigator carries a small satchel of charts, pencils, and a single chocolate bar tucked in the side pocket. He always keeps one, saved from his rations, though he rarely eats it. At 5, the engines begin to turn. The sound builds gradually, a cough, then a roar, then a steady pounding rhythm that vibrates through the ground. One by one, the bombers awaken, exhaust plumes glowing faintly blue in the cold air. The vibration seeps into the chest, into the bones. Voices are lost in the noise. Communication becomes gestures and nods. Before boarding, the crew gather briefly beneath the wing. The pilot looks around, counting faces. 10 men, the same 10 who flew yesterday and the day before. He gives a small nod. No speeches, no dramatics, just a quiet shared understanding. Each man climbs the ladder into the aircraft, ducking beneath the narrow hatch. Inside, the air smells of oil, leather, and old smoke. Frost creeps along the metal skin, forming delicate patterns that glint in the light from the open hatch. The crew move to their positions by instinct. Pilot and co-pilot forward, navigator and bombardier at the nose, engineer near the top turret, gunners at waist and tail. Each seat, each handle, each switch has its place. The pilot runs through the checklist aloud, his voice steady through the intercom. Fuel pressure, magnetos, cowl flaps, hydraulics. The co-pilot repeats each item, ticking boxes with a pencil. It's a ritual as sacred as prayer.
Outside, a ground crewman signals with a gloved hand, then steps back.
The engines throttle up, and the aircraft trembles. The intercom crackles.
All set?
The navigator answers, voice muffled by his oxygen mask. Charts ready. The engineer adds, systems green. The gunners check their guns. The metallic click of bolts sliding into place. The smell of cordite lingers faintly from yesterday's mission. Through the cockpit windows, the fog begins to lift. The first streaks of dawn stretch across the sky pale blue, washed in grey. The control tower's signal lamp flashes green.
It's time. The pilot pushes the throttles forward.
The B-24 begins to move, wheels creaking against the wet tarmac. Behind it, others follow, forming a slow procession toward the runway. The ground crew raise their hands in farewell, faces smudged with oil. The engines thunder louder as the planes line up, each one taking its turn to leap into the sky. As the aircraft gathers speed, the navigator glances down at his charts. The chocolate bar is still in his pocket. He knows it will be hours before he has the chance to touch it again, if at all. He presses it flat, almost as if to make it last longer. I feel alone. The runway rushes past in a blur of frost and light. The nose lifts, the vibration changes pitch, and gravity loosens its hold. The B-24 rises steadily into the pale morning sky, the land below shrinking into a patchwork of fields and mist. The air inside grows colder by the minute, the windows frosting at the edges. Soon, the only warmth will come from the thin layers of heated wiring inside their suits and the faint memory of that breakfast powdered eggs. Bacon and strong black coffee eaten in silence hours ago. The mess hall already feels like another world. At 30,000 feet, there will be no smell of food, no sound of conversation, only the hiss of oxygen and the low, endless drone of the engines. But for now, as the aircraft levels off and the horizon brightens, the navigator reaches once more for his pocket, feeling the outline of the chocolate bar. It's the only meal he'll likely have all day. The engines settle into their rhythm, a low, steady roar that fills every corner of the aircraft. The B-24 is climbing, its wings trembling against thin air, the four propellers cutting steady circles through the pale morning light. England has already disappeared below, the green fields now distant patches fading into cloud. Ahead lies the Channel, then Europe, and somewhere beyond that the target. Inside the aircraft, the temperature drops rapidly. At 20,000 feet, frost forms along the edges of the glass. At 30,000, the cold becomes absolute. The air outside is 40 degrees Celsius. There is no insulation, no heating system strong enough to fight it. The men sit inside a shell of thin aluminum, each rivet and seam conducting the cold inward. Every breath turns to ice crystals. The crew wear electrically heated suits layered over wool and sheepskin. Thick gloves, fur-lined boots, oxygen masks fixed tight across their faces. Movement is slow and clumsy. Communication is possible only through the intercom, a tinny, crackling system that distorts every word. The air is so dry that even speaking hurts. At altitude, food becomes an afterthought, yet hunger always returns. The flight will last 10 hours, and the body burns calories quickly in the cold. Each man carries his own small ration, usually a sandwich, a chocolate bar, or a piece of fruit from the morning mess. They keep them tucked inside pockets, wrapped in wax paper or foil, hoping to preserve a trace of warmth. Within an hour, everything is frozen solid. Bread becomes as hard as wood, butter stiff as ice, fruit inedible. Chewing is nearly impossible through the oxygen mask, and removing it, even for a moment, risks frostbite or fainting. The air at this altitude holds only a fraction of the oxygen found on the ground. After 30 seconds without the mask, vision narrows, the world fades to grey, so the men eat in fragments carefully. They lift one side of the mask, take a bite, then seal it again. The process is awkward, done with one gloved hand while the other grips a control or weapon. Most give up quickly, leaving food untouched till the descent homeward. The navigator tries once to bite into his chocolate bar, only to find it frozen so hard it chips a tooth. He laughs silently, shaking his head, and tucks it back into his pocket. In the waist section of the bomber, where the side guns face the open sky, the gunners share what they can. One man presses a sandwich against the warm metal casing of a hydraulic pump, hoping the engine's heat might soften it. Another warms a tin of coffee concentrate between his gloves, rotating it slowly. The smell of metal and grease fills the air. It is faintly comforting familiar. The bombardier sits forward in the nose compartment, surrounded by glass and instruments. He checks the drift sights, adjusts the settings on the Norden bomb sight. Outside, sunlight glints off the frost-covered edges of the perspex windows. He can see other bombers forming up in the distance, silver dots shimmering in the thin light. Each carries its own small crew, each repeating the same gestures, checking gauges, adjusting valves, watching the horizon. It's a strange kind of isolation. 10 men sharing a space no larger than a train carriage, yet each trapped within his own world of noise and machinery. They see one another's movements, but not their faces.
Oxygen masks hide every expression.
Words, when they come, are clipped and distorted through the intercom. Check number 3 engine. Adjust altitude. Tail clear. Human voices reduced to mechanical sound. Hours pass this way. The vibration of the engines seeps into bones and nerves until it becomes a background hum, the only constant in a world of motion. The cold never leaves. Even with heated suits, fingers grow stiff, toes numb. When the heater wires fail, as they often do, there's no fixing them until landing. The men simply endure. Every so often, the radio operator taps a message to the lead aircraft, fingers clumsy in thick gloves. Static crackles across the channel. The reply comes back garbled, almost musical. Outside, vapor trails stretch across the sky like white scars. The formation holds. 20 bombers flying in loose pattern, each separated by a few hundred yards. From a distance, they look calm, almost peaceful, but inside, every vibration is a reminder of fragility. In the waist compartment, the gunner finally manages to warm his sandwich enough to bite. The bread cracks, crumbs scattering over his lap. He chews slowly, tasting only salt and cold. The act of eating feels almost absurd at this altitude, as though the body has forgotten how.
Yet it grounds him.
A moment of ordinary life amid the machinery and frost. The navigator, still at his station, glances at his watch. 2 hours gone. He scribbles coordinates, adjusts his course line a few degrees. Beside him, a small thermos of coffee rattles gently with the vibration. When he opens it, steam escapes for just a moment before freezing into thin white mist. The first sip burns his tongue. The next is already cold. He drinks anyway. The pilot and co-pilot sit side by side, eyes fixed on the instruments. Frost forms on the inner glass of their oxygen masks. They speak rarely, only to confirm headings or engine readings. The windshield is a sheet of ice except for the narrow arcs cleared by the de-icer system. The view ahead is endless white cloud and blue light. The sun reflects off the upper layers, blindingly bright. There's a quiet rhythm to it, all the small, repetitive movements, the checking and rechecking, the routine of survival. Eat, adjust, breathe, repeat.
Hours pass, marked only by the slow ticking of the clock and the fading of the coffee's warmth.
Every sound is familiar, the engine's deep vibration, the crackle of static, the creak of metal under cold stress. The body adapts, but the mind drifts. Sometimes, to stay alert, the crew speak over the intercom. The jokes are simple, more habit than humor. Someone asks what's for lunch. Someone else answers, same as breakfast frost and fear. A burst of laughter follows, then silence. The laughter helps, even when it feels forced. It reminds them that they're still human up here, still more than extensions of the aircraft itself. The waist gunner keeps count of hours by the number of cigarettes he doesn't smoke. Lighting one would be madness in this oxygen-rich environment, but he still reaches for the habit, the phantom comfort of a match between his fingers. Instead, he shifts his weight, checks his gun, and peers through the frost-covered window. The world outside is silent, an ocean of clouds stretching to infinity. Occasionally, the cold air creates optical illusions. Sunlight refracts through ice crystals, forming halos around the aircraft. The men call it the angel ring. It moves with them, a faint rainbow hovering over the shadow of their bomber, cast onto the clouds below. For a few seconds, the sight holds them all. Then it fades, and the sky returns to white and blue. The pilot notes the time, the altitude, the fuel consumption.
Everything is normal.
The engines maintain their rhythm. The navigator checks his route again, tracing the line across his chart. Below, faint outlines of land begin to appear through the cloud rivers, fields, small towns. Continental Europe. They're over enemy territory now. The first sign of tension comes not from words, but from silence. Conversation stops entirely. The crew tighten harnesses, adjust masks. The navigator folds his maps neatly, securing them under a strap. The bombardier removes his gloves to calibrate the sighting system, his fingertips red with cold. The intercom crackles once, then clears. Static fills the space between heartbeats. A few men try to eat again, small pieces of chocolate or hard candy tucked under masks. It helps with the dryness in the mouth, with the constant taste of metal. But the appetite is gone now, replaced by a focused stillness.
Hands hover near controls, eyes scan the horizon.
The cold feels sharper, the air heavier. Every sound is amplified, the ticking clock, the low hum, the faint creak of the fuselage. Then, through the intercom, the pilot's voice cuts in, calm, even, distorted by static, but unmistakable. Flak ahead, the words hang in the air, simple and final. No one speaks after that. Food is forgotten. The navigator tucks his half-eaten chocolate into a pocket. The gunner sets his mug aside, still half full. Every man turns to his station, the rhythm of routine giving way to quiet readiness. Outside, the sky looks peaceful until it doesn't. Small black puffs begin to bloom in the distance, drifting lazily at first, then thickening into clouds. The sound of the engines grows louder in the headphones, as if trying to drown out what's coming. The bomber holds its course, steady, unwavering. 10 men sharing silence, hunger and fear suspended between earth and sky, waiting. The flight back is always the longest. The aircraft shudders with every gust, a dull vibration running through the fuselage. The smell of cordite lingers. The men can still feel the concussive thump of flak that struck near the wings an hour ago. Now the sky is clearer. The horizon stretches in muted blue and grey, the channel somewhere ahead. The sun hangs low, flat and pale, glinting on frost that still coats the windows. Inside, the men are silent. No one speaks unless necessary. The intercom carries only brief words: altitude, course correction, engine temperature. Every sound feels heavy in the aftermath. The adrenaline that kept them steady has faded, leaving a dull ache of fatigue. They have been in the air for 9 hours.
Limbs feel like lead. Eyes sting from oxygen dryness.
Every muscle twitches from cold. The navigator sits hunched over his chart table, hands trembling slightly as he plots their course back to England. His pencil scratches faintly against the map. The chocolate bar from earlier lies broken in his pocket, forgotten. He glances at it once, then looks away. Hunger will have to wait until the ground. At the controls, the pilot adjusts the throttles. The engines hum unevenly now, one still misfiring from flak damage. He can feel it through the yoke, a faint vibration that repeats every few seconds.
It's manageable, but it keeps him tense.
The co-pilot checks gauges, making notes with stiff fingers. They've both stopped speaking except in numbers, altitude, speed, fuel. Below, the English coast appears like a grey ribbon through haze.
Home at least for tonight.
They begin their descent, the cabin groaning softly as the pressure changes. Frost melts along the inside of the fuselage, dripping onto gloves and instruments. The oxygen masks come off, revealing pale faces lined with fatigue. The sudden taste of unfiltered air, even metallic and cold, feels almost sweet. The pilot radios the tower, voice flat with exhaustion. Horsham St. Faith, this is Liberty 7, requesting landing clearance. Static answers first, then the familiar calm reply. Liberty 7, you are clear.
Runway 22.
Wind from the west at 8. The runway lights blink faintly through the mist. The pilot lowers the landing gear. The wheels groan.
Flaps down. Speed steady.
The bomber glides in low, the sound of the engines deepening as the ground rises to meet it. A soft bump, a long roll, then silence as the throttles close. They're down. The relief is almost painful.
Hands unclench from controls. Shoulder sag.
The smell of oil and exhaust fills the cabin as the engines wind down. For a long moment, no one moves. Then, slowly, the crew remove helmets and gloves, stretching stiff fingers, blinking against the sudden stillness. Outside, ground crew run toward the plane. The men climb out one by one, boots hitting the tarmac with dull thuds. The air feels impossibly dense after hours of thin oxygen. They breathe deeply, filling their lungs. The sky above is fading to evening, a pale orange glow spreading over the hangars. Somewhere distant, another aircraft lands, its engines echoing like thunder. The formalities begin at once. Debriefing in a low-roofed hut that smells of damp wood and cigarette smoke. The intelligence officer asks questions in a monotone flak intensity. Enemy fighters, bomb release confirmation. The crew answer automatically, voices flat. They recount details from memory, numbers and coordinates already blurring. The room is warm, too warm, and someone nearly falls asleep mid-sentence. The officer nods, makes notes and dismisses them. That's all. The mission is complete. Outside, floodlights cast long shadows across the field. Mechanics swarm over the aircraft, checking bullet holes, refueling, recording damage. For the crew, though, the day is finished. They walk toward the mess hall, boots dragging slightly on the concrete. No one speaks until the building's yellow light spills over them, bright and inviting. Inside, the warmth hits like a wave. The air smells of food, real food, not tinned rations or frozen chocolate, but cooked meat, onions, coffee. The sound of laughter hums softly from another table. Some men from earlier missions sit together, their uniforms stained, their eyes rimmed with red. They nod as the newcomers enter, an unspoken welcome shared by those who returned. The cook stands behind the counter, apron streaked with grease. He's been here all day, waiting for crews to come back. He knows that food is the first step back to normal life. Tonight's meal is simple roast beef, potatoes, peas, and thick gravy. For dessert, apple pie and custard. The smell alone seems to ease the stiffness in their shoulders. The men collect trays, slide along the line, thank the cook out of habit. He smiles as he always does, though his eyes flick briefly toward the clock each time the door opens. He keeps count of who returns. Everyone on base does. The crew sit together at a corner table, plates steaming in front of them. For a while, they eat in silence. The first bites taste unreal warm, rich, full of flavor. After weeks of powdered eggs and tinned meat, the texture of real food feels luxurious. The warmth spreads through them, a slow return to life. Gradually, conversations start. Not about the mission, never at first, but about the food, the weather, the radio songs drifting from a speaker in the corner. Someone tells a joke about the coffee being strong enough to patch bullet holes. Laughter follows, tired but genuine. The cook passes by, collecting trays, and the bombardier tells him it's the best meal he's ever had. He probably says that every time, but tonight he means it. When the meal ends, no one wants to leave immediately. They linger over cups of tea and coffee, soaking in the warmth. The mess hall lights glow softly, casting halos on the tables. Outside, the night air is cool and quiet. Through the windows, they can see mechanics still working under floodlights, their figures moving slowly around the silent bombers. Eventually, the men drift out, one by one. Some head to the showers, where steam fogs the mirrors and the smell of soap replaces that of oil. Others write quick letters home, hands trembling from exhaustion. The navigator opens his locker and finally unwraps the chocolate bar, now soft again, and eats it piece by piece without tasting it. It's not hunger anymore, it's habit.
Something to mark that he's back.
In the dormitory, the beds creak as men collapse into them, boots thud to the floor. The sound of breathing fills the room deep, heavy, the kind that comes after survival. Some talk softly in the dark, short fragments about the flak, the weather, the near misses. The words drift off mid-sentence. Sleep takes them before they can finish. Outside, the airfield is calm again, engines silent. The moon reflected faintly on the wet runway. In the distance, a generator hums steadily, and the smell of coffee drifts from the mess hall where the night cook prepares for the cruise still to come. There will be more tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. In the morning, the routine will begin again, the same breakfast of powdered eggs, the same coffee, the same briefing room with its maps and targets. But for now, there is peace. The thin line between air and earth has closed once more. Later, when the pilot wakes in the half-light, he'll remember only fragments, the roar of the engines, the glow of tracer fire, the first sight of the coast on the way home. But above all, he'll remember that first sip of coffee in the mess hall, hot and bitter, cutting through the taste of oxygen and metal. It's a small thing, almost trivial. Yet it marks the moment when flight ends and life resumes, when 10 men, frozen and silent in the air, return to being human again on the ground. For them, that simple cup of coffee becomes the dividing line between two worlds, life aloft and life restored on Earth. It's late November, 1942, on the endless plains west of Stalingrad. The horizon is a flat grey line, the air sharp with the dry sting of approaching winter. Snow drifts in thin layers across the steppe, settling on frozen ground that hasn't seen warmth in weeks. The wind moves constantly, a low moan that carries dust and the smell of smoke from far-off fires. Across this landscape crawls a small column of vehicles, trucks, wagons, and one curious contraption trailing behind a horse team. It's a field kitchen, a goulash canone, its iron chimney puffing weak trails of steam into the air. The soldiers call it the soup cannon. It's not a weapon, but for the hungry men of the Wehrmacht, it's almost as vital as one. The goulash canone is simple but ingenious. A wood-fired boiler mounted on wheels, 2 large kettles inside for soup or stew, smaller containers for coffee or tea. Each one can feed up to 200 men, though on this front there are far more mouths than the kitchen can serve. The cook, or Kochunteroffizier, travels with it everywhere, tending to it like a priest to an altar. This kitchen belongs to Feldküche 413, attached to the 305th Infantry Division. The cook's name is Unteroffizier Karl Brenner, 36 years old, a former butcher from Stuttgart. He's been with the unit since the early days of the invasion in 1941. His hair is streaked with frost, his face weathered by smoke and wind. He knows every rattle and squeak of his kitchen wagon, every dent in the kettles. The day begins long before sunrise. The camp stirs to life slowly, soldiers emerging from dugouts and makeshift shelters. Their breath hangs in the air, visible in the cold. Somewhere nearby, a machine gun coughs a short burst, not combat, just a test fire. The sound fades quickly. The men's stomachs are empty, their fingers stiff. They wait for one sound above all, the clang of the ladle on the pot, the signal that breakfast is ready. Brenner wakes in the dark, brushing snow from his blanket. His assistant, a younger man named Dietz, is already breaking kindling for the stove. The goulash cannoli creaks as it warms, the iron expanding with heat. Brenner adds coal, coaxing the flames higher. Within minutes, a thin plume of smoke rises, curling into the pale sky. The smell of burning wood spreads through the camp, the smell of promise. Breakfast is simple: barley porridge, a little fat, sometimes bits of dried meat. Water is precious, brought in barrels from a stream 2 kilometers away, already half frozen. Brenner breaks the ice on top, ladles out what he needs, and sets it to boil. He adds grain, stirs with a long wooden paddle, and hums softly to himself. It's a quiet rhythm, one he's repeated every day since the division crossed into Russia. By the time the first light spreads across the snow, the soup is ready. Soldiers line up with mess tins in hand, breath fogging in front of them. There's little talking. Each man receives a ladle of thick porridge, a piece of black bread, and a tin of ersatz coffee, a bitter drink made from roasted barley and chicory.
Meant to resemble the real thing. They eat standing or crouched, backs turned to the wind.
Some use bayonets as makeshift spoons. The food is plain, heavy, and filling. It tastes faintly of smoke, metal, and saw, but it's warm. That's what matters. For a few minutes, the camp feels almost peaceful. The field kitchen is more than a tool of sustenance. It's a symbol of order. In a war where everything feels uncertain, the weather, the enemy, even survival, the appearance of Brenner's wagon is a small reminder of structure. The men know that as long as the goulash cannoli arrives, the army still functions. When breakfast ends, Brenner cleans the kettles meticulously. Hot water is poured through, every surface wiped down with rags. The metal freezes almost instantly, frosting over as he works. Discipline in hygiene is vital. Illness spreads faster than enemy bullets. He checks his supplies: sacks of dried peas, tins of lard, jars of sauerkraut, and a dwindling supply of salt. Everything is logged carefully in a small notebook. By midday, the routine begins again. The next meal is pea soup with barley and bits of horse meat, the recipe unchanged since the days of the Kaiser's army. Brenner chops frozen vegetables with a hatchet, the blade dull from use. The fire crackles, throwing occasional sparks into the wind. The smell of the soup drifts across the snow, faint but unmistakable. Soldiers drift closer as the scent reaches them. They hover near the kitchen, pretending to warm their hands, but really waiting for the first ladle to rise. Brenner ignores their glances, stirring patiently. He times each batch by instinct, not clock. When he finally calls out, "Essen ist fertig," "Food's ready!" the line forms instantly. Distribution follows the same pattern every time. Officers first, then NCOs, then enlisted men. It's not favoritism, it's procedure, the way the Wehrmacht maintains discipline even in hunger. Each man receives his ration: 750 grams of soup, 1 slice of bread, 1 spoon of fat. It's fair, measured, recorded. As the soldiers eat, Brenner and Dietz serve themselves last, scraping the bottom of the kettle. The peas stick stubbornly to the iron, a sign of overboiling. Brenner frowns. Small mistakes annoy him more than danger. He eats quietly, then sets about cleaning again. In the afternoon, trucks arrive from divisional headquarters, bringing ammunition and mail. No food. Supplies are growing thin. The men joke about it, but the laughter sounds hollow. They've heard rumors of encirclement, of Soviet forces closing in from the north and south. Brenner doesn't comment. He just keeps the fire burning. By dusk, the camp has settled again. Smoke from the field kitchen mixes with the smoke of countless small fires across the steppe. The air smells of ash and cold metal. The soldiers huddle in groups, writing letters, checking rifles, playing quiet games of cards. Brenner moves among them, collecting empty tins, returning to his post by the wagon. The embers glow faintly red inside the stove. He prepares for the evening meal the same as always, barley stew and ersatz coffee. The process is mechanical now, his hands moving automatically even as his thoughts drift. He remembers his shop in Stuttgart, the smell of real coffee, the warmth of ovens. It feels like another life entirely. The temperature drops quickly as night falls. The wind sharpens, slicing through coats and blankets. Frost creeps over the wagon wheels, the metal rim shining under the moonlight. The soldiers retreat into their shelters, wrapping themselves in whatever they can find. Brenner ladles the last portions, sets aside a small bowl for himself, and sits by the fire to eat. The stew has thickened too much. The peas have broken down into paste. He adds a little water from the barrel to thin it. The ladle hits something solid, ice. He frowns, taps it again. The sound is dull. He lifts the lid and sees the surface already frozen solid, a pale crust spreading from edge to edge. The temperature has fallen below 30 degrees. The water is gone for the night. He sighs, rubbing his hands together for warmth, watching his breath cloud in the dark. The fire inside the goulash cannone burns low, the last of the wood crackling faintly. Around him the camp is silent except for the wind. Tomorrow he'll have to find more fuel, more water, more of everything. But for now, he sits beside his iron kitchen, the last warm place on a frozen front, and waits for dawn. The snow has stopped falling, but the cold has not eased. It presses in from every side, through clothing, through canvas, through the very metal of the field kitchen itself. It is December 1942, and the Sixth Army is trapped inside the shrinking pocket around Stalingrad. The once steady rumble of supply convoys has fallen silent. No fuel, no bread wagons. Only the wind moving across the frozen steppe, whispering through the ruins. The field kitchen stands near a line of shallow trenches, its wheels half buried in ice. The paint has peeled away. Frost has turned the metal white. Inside, the last of the wood supply burns slowly, the flames weak and blue. Unteroffizier Karl Brenner watches it in silence. Each stick he feeds into the fire is a calculation. How many hours of warmth, how many pots of soup remain before there is nothing left to burn? The water barrel froze solid days ago. To melt snow for cooking, Brenner uses shell casings as makeshift pots, balancing them over small fires made from splintered ammunition crates. The smoke is acrid, the heat uneven, but it works. He stirs constantly, careful that the ice at the bottom does not scorch before it liquefies. The effort takes hours. Time has lost meaning here. Daylight is pale and brief. Night a long grey haze of frost and wind. Food is almost gone. Bread rations have dropped to 50 grams per man per day, a slice so thin it can be seen through when held to the light. The loaves are baked with sawdust mixed into the flour, the only way to make the supply last. The soldiers joke that it crunches like gravel, but no one wastes a crumb. They scrape the crust clean of frost and dirt before swallowing, the sound of chewing slow and deliberate. The meat stores are finished. What remains are tins of horse meat salvaged from fallen animals. The horses themselves have become both transport and meal. When one collapses in the snow, the men gather silently, stripping the carcass before the flesh freezes solid. The cook receives the cut's last thin strips to boil into soup, the bones for broth. Even the hooves are saved, simmered for hours until they release a thin gelatin. Frozen potatoes are a treasure now. Brenner digs them from an abandoned supply dump, each one as hard as stone. He thaws them near the stove, rotating them slowly until the skins blacken and split. The taste is smoky, bitter, and wonderful. For a brief moment, the smell of roasting potatoes brings the camp alive men crowd near, eyes bright with anticipation. Every meal has become an improvisation. Barley stretched with melted snow, pea flour mixed with melted animal fat, soup thickened with crumbs scraped from the bottom of empty tins. The recipes are no longer German or military or anything at all, they are survival in liquid form. Brenner records each mixture in his notebook, not out of pride, but habit.
Even in disaster, there is order. The men come to him constantly, asking what there will be to eat.
He tells them the truth, whatever can be found. Some smile, others curse quietly, but all of them return when the ladle strikes the kettle. The cook has become a symbol of persistence, a small island of routine in a world that no longer follows rules. Letters from home no longer arrive.
Radios crackle with distant voices, half words swallowed by static.
The supply drops promised by Luftwaffe dispatches come less and less. When they do, the parachutes drift far from the lines, landing among the enemy or vanishing into the snow. The men watch the sky after every rumour of engines, eyes narrowed against the light, hoping to see the white shapes falling. Usually there is nothing. Brenner keeps the kitchen alive with scavenged fuel fence posts, broken rifle stocks, furniture pulled from ruined houses. The smoke smells of paint and dust. When the wood runs out, he burns straw and horse dung. The soldiers joke that they can taste the fuel in the soup, but they eat anyway. The warmth matters more than the flavour. In his diary, Brenner writes short sentences each evening, fingers stiff from the cold. 27 December. Soup from bones, good fire. Men quiet. The next day, little left. Horses gone.
Men ask for seconds. He doesn't mention the sound of the wounded from the field hospital nearby, or the silence that follows when supplies run out there too.
He writes only about food, the one thing he can control. Around the camp, hunger shapes everything. Men trade cigarettes for crumbs, buttons for a spoonful of fat. Some chew leather straps, others pick through the snow for frozen kernels of grain spilled from old wagons. Brenner knows they sneak to the kitchen at night, searching for scraps. He pretends not to notice. Sometimes he leaves a pot outside, half full, forgotten. By morning, it's always empty. The smell of cooking carries far in the frozen air. Soviet lines are close now, so close that the enemy can probably smell it too. There is an uneasy truce between hunger and fear. Brenner cooks quietly, using only small fires, shielding the light with torn blankets. He works in gloves without fingers, the tips of his skin cracked and raw. Each breath burns in the throat. The fire's glow reflects in his eyes, the only warmth left. Among the soldiers, food has become the language of memory. They speak of bread at home, of sausages, of beer served cold from cellars. They list favourite dishes like prayers recited softly before sleep. Brenner listens but never joins in. He has learned that speaking of warmth makes the cold worse. Instead, he tells small stories of the butcher shop he once ran, of a pig so large it took 4 men to carry. The men laugh, and for a few minutes, the world feels almost distant. On New Year's Eve, there is no celebration. The thermometer shows 35 degrees. The air sparkles with ice dust under the moon. Brenner makes a soup of everything left: frozen peas, a handful of grain, a few shreds of horse meat, and melted snow. It takes all night to cook. The fire is small, flickering weakly under the iron kettle. Around it, the men wait silently, bowls in hand. When the ladle rises, they move forward one by one, filling their tins. No one speaks. Steam drifts upward and disappears into the cold. By morning, even the firewood is gone. Brenner breaks apart one of the kitchen shelves to keep the fire alive a few minutes longer. His hands shake from exhaustion. Dietz, his assistant, sits beside him, eyes half closed.
"It smells good," he whispers, voice thin.
Brenner nods, though he knows it doesn't. The soup is watery and bitter, the last of the barley burnt at the edges.
But it is hot.
That's enough. Later that day, a shell lands near the camp. The blast buries the kitchen in snow but doesn't destroy it. Brenner and Dietz dig it out with helmets, coughing in the smoke. The fire is out. When they relight it, the flames burn unevenly, leaving streaks of black soot across the kettle. The soup tastes of ash that night. The men still thank him for it. From a nearby trench, a young private writes in his diary, "We wait for the soup. It is thin, but it is life." The cook is calm. He stands by the fire as if this is still a normal world. The entry ends there. The pages after are blank. As the days pass, the number of bowls grows smaller. Men vanish into the snow or lie still in their shelters, too weak to move. Brenner counts what's left: a handful of flour, a few potatoes, frozen solid, and one sack of dried peas. He adds water, stirs, and watches the thin mixture swirl. Steam rises faintly, the smell almost sweet. He serves the meal carefully, measuring each portion by sight. The line moves slowly. The men's faces are hollow, their eyes sunken. They hold out tins with shaking hands. He fills them without a word. When the pot is nearly empty, he scrapes the bottom with the ladle, coaxing out the last bits. The sound is harsh in the quiet metal on metal, echoing like a bell. There are still 10 men waiting. He looks at the pot, then at them. He hesitates only a moment before adding snow, stirring until it melts, thinning the soup once more. The fire sputters. Steam curls upward into the frozen air. When he lifts the ladle again, the soup runs like water. It's enough for everyone, barely a single pot.
60 men.
And the next supply drop, if it comes at all, is still days away. By January 1943, the pocket around Stalingrad has closed completely. The steppe that once seemed endless is now a prison of snow and silence. The air no longer carries the sound of artillery, only the wind moving through ruined buildings and the creak of frozen wood. The Sixth Army is finished, though few have yet admitted it aloud. Hunger has done what the enemy could not. The field kitchen still stands, though it barely functions now. The goulash kanone's chimney leans to one side, its wheels half buried in snow. The iron is brittle from the cold, every surface coated in frost. The fire has gone out. There is nothing left to burn. Unteroffizier Karl Brenner sits beside it, wrapped in a blanket stiff with ice, his breath slow and shallow.
Around him, the camp has fallen into stillness.
The voices of the men have faded to murmurs, the energy to move long gone. Rations have ceased entirely. The last supply drop came more than a week ago, a handful of crates scattered by wind, some lost behind enemy lines, others shattered on impact. The few tins recovered were gone within hours. Now food is memory. Men speak of it constantly, as if words alone could fill their stomachs. Bread, butter, soup, the taste of home that will never return. In the final days, soldiers share everything: crumbs, scraps, fragments. A piece of frozen bread split among 4 men. A spoon of soup passed from hand to hand. They eat slowly, reverently, as though performing a ritual. The act of eating has become sacred, a link to life itself. Brenner continues to cook, though there is nothing left to cook with. He melts snow in the kettle, stirring it with the same rhythm as before, the ladle moving through water, as if by muscle memory. The men line up, as always, holding empty tins, waiting for something that no longer exists. He serves them anyway, ladling out the thin liquid with a steady hand. No one speaks. They drink in silence, eyes closed, imagining flavor that isn't there. A lieutenant nearby keeps a journal. His handwriting trembles from weakness, the ink freezing between strokes. The cook still lights the fire, he writes. He serves us hot water as soup. It keeps us alive, or at least makes us believe we are. The entry ends mid-sentence. In the ruins of Stalingrad, fires burn from wreckage. The snow around them melts briefly, revealing frozen shapes beneath horses, men, broken machines. The city has become a landscape of ghosts. The smell of smoke and decay hangs over everything, mixing with the bitter cold. Hunger dulls fear, it also dulls thought. Men sleep more than they wake, their dreams filled with kitchens and warm bread. On January 31st, the last fires go out. The divisions collapse one by one. Word spreads through the trenches. Surrender. Some cheer weakly, others simply stare. For many, the word means nothing. They are too tired to understand it. When the Soviet soldiers arrive, they find the goulash kanone first, its barrel blackened, its lid open, frost clinging to the inside. The pot is empty. A few spoons lie nearby, frozen to the ground. The Soviets take photographs before moving on. They do not find Brenner immediately. He is in a dugout a few meters away, wrapped in his coat, his notebook still in his pocket. The final entry reads of a nothing left, fire out. Still they come for soup. The surviving cooks are taken prisoner, along with the rest of the army. They march slowly through the snow, boots worn to the sole, uniforms hanging in tatters. Some still carry their ladles, small mementos of their work.
One man ties his to his belt like a medal.
They are led eastward, past the ruins, past the shattered wagons, past what remains of their kitchens. In captivity, food remains the center of thought. Prisoners trade stories of meals as if recounting legends. They describe flavors in detail: the thickness of pea soup, the texture of rye bread, the smell of onions frying in fat. They repeat these memories endlessly, the same way others recite prayers. To remember food is to remember humanity. Brenner, when asked years later about those final days, speaks quietly. His voice remains steady, though his hands tremble. "We fed them until the end," he says. "Even when there was nothing left, we kept the fire going. They needed to see the smoke." The failure at Stalingrad was not just military, it was logistical. Supplies stretched too far, too thin, across a continent unprepared for the cold. The field kitchens, designed for steady roads and short lines, became useless in the mud and snow. Horses died, fuel froze, and communication collapsed. Without food, the army's discipline crumbled. Hunger became the true enemy, patient and undefeated. Historians later calculated that each soldier received less than 200 calories a day in the final weeks. The human body cannot survive long on that. Frostbite, disease, and despair finished what the cold had begun. Yet even as men starved, the cooks still worked. They scoured the ruins for anything that could burn, melted ice, stirred empty kettles. The act itself, the ritual of cooking, became the last defense against chaos. Among the letters recovered after the surrender was one from an infantryman to his wife, written but never sent. "The cook says tomorrow we will have soup." I believe him. He always keeps his word. The page ends with a line smudged by frost. The letter was found in his pocket months later. After the war, some of the surviving field cooks were interviewed in displaced persons camps. They spoke not of battles, but of pots, fires, and rations. One man said, "You learn to measure hope by spoons." Another said, "The fire was more important than the food." It told the men they were still part of an army. Their words were simple, unembellished, like the meals they once served. The goulash cannone itself continued in service long after the war, used by both sides during Reconstruction. The design changed little, a testament to its practicality, but for those who remembered Stalingrad, it remained a relic of both sustenance and suffering, a symbol of how something meant to nourish could also witness starvation. Brenner returned to Germany in 1949, one of the few who survived captivity. He reopened a small butcher shop in Stuttgart. On the wall behind the counter, he hung a photograph, the only one he had from the war. It showed a field kitchen half buried in snow, smoke rising from its chimney. Customers never asked about it, and he never explained. But each morning, before opening, he looked at it for a long time. In his later years, he said he could still hear the sound of his ladle scraping the bottom of the pot. It was like music, he said. The sound of men waiting, the sound of being alive. The legacy of the field kitchens is often overlooked in histories of the Eastern Front. They were not weapons, nor symbols of glory. They were small engines of endurance, their smoke a fragile thread, linking men to the idea of home. In every army, in every camp, the same truth held. Food was both weapon and weakness. Without it, strength and order dissolved. With it, even briefly, life persisted. By the time the snow melted and spring returned to the steppe, the ground was littered with remnants of those kitchens' pots, ladles, broken wheels, scattered spoons. The frost had preserved them. The soldiers were gone, but the signs of their daily struggle remained, quiet and unchanging. Even in defeat, the field cooks remembered that sound, the rhythmic scraping of ladles against empty pots, the faint metallic echo that lingered in the cold air. To them it was more than noise. It was the sound of endurance, the last heartbeat of an army that had nothing left but the will to keep stirring. It's early July 1944 in Normandy. The invasion beaches are behind now, a landscape of wrecked landing craft, tangled barbed wire, and the lingering smell of salt and oil. The fighting has moved inland, into the bocage country, endless hedgerows, narrow lanes and fields, divided by thick earthen banks. The sun is pale, the air heavy with humidity and the faint, constant buzz of flies somewhere near St. Lo. A group of American infantrymen from the 29th Division huddle in a small orchard, their rifles stacked neatly, helmets resting upside down in the grass. It's just after dawn, and for the first time in 2 days, they have a moment to eat. The supply trucks have not yet reached this far, but every man carries something in his pack, a small cardboard box, roughly the size of a book. Stamped on the side in black letters, U.S. Army Field Ration, Type K. To the men it's simply K rations, designed for paratroopers and infantry on the move, compact, calorie-dense, and uniform. Each one meant to last a day, divided into breakfast, dinner, and supper units. In reality, a man could eat all three in half a day and still feel hungry. They open the boxes with pocket knives, the cardboard stiff from moisture. Inside, the contents are always the same: a small tin of processed meat or cheese, a packet of biscuits, a powdered drink mix, a few sugar tablets, some chewing gum, and most importantly,
a cigarette pack with 4 smokes and a single wooden matchbook.
Every man knows the layout by heart. Every man has his favorites and his complaints. Private First Class. Robert Dean shakes his head as he lifts out a tin marked chopped ham and eggs. Tastes like rubber and salt, he mutters. His buddy across the circle grins. That's the deluxe model, he replies. Mine's meat and vegetable hash.
Smells like the inside of my boot. The laughter is quiet but real.
Even bad food eaten together carries a kind of comfort. The biscuits are hard, square, and dry, officially called compressed cereal discs, but known universally as dog biscuits. They crumble into dust between the fingers, so the men soak them in water from their canteens, softening them enough to chew. The drink mix, usually lemon or orange powder, turns the water cloudy and faintly sweet. It hides the metallic taste of the canteens, which have been refilled too many times from ditches and rain barrels. Each ration includes a small packet of instant coffee powdered, bitter but precious. The men heat it in tin cups over small fuel tablets that burn with blue flames. The smell drifts faintly through the orchard, mixing with the scent of wet grass and cordite from last night's firefight. One man stirs his coffee with a bayonet, another with a stick. A few drops spill onto the ground, instantly darkening the soil. It's a ritual now, as familiar as cleaning rifles or checking ammunition. The men sit in a circle, eating in silence or trading jokes about the army's culinary genius. Someone always says the same line: "This stuff could win the war if we feed it to the Germans." A few chuckle, a few don't bother. The humor is less about laughter than survival, a small rebellion against monotony. Each K-ration meal carries about 2,800 calories, though no one counts them. The food is functional fuel for marching, digging, and fighting. But even in its simplicity, it has its own hierarchy. The tins of cheese and bacon spread are prized, as are the biscuits that come with a small cube of chocolate. Some rations include a fruit bar, others a packet of raisins. The soldiers trade constantly, turning the morning meal into a quiet marketplace. Cigarettes are the real currency. 4 per box, usually Lucky Strikes or Chesterfields. The first thing many men do is tap the pack, light one, and lean back against their packs with a long exhale. Smoke drifts upward, curling into the low branches. The sound of lighters snapping open and shut ripples through the camp like a familiar melody. The cigarettes mark the transition from combat readiness to the brief illusion of calm. They make the food taste better, or at least less like metal. They fill the air with something warmer than fear. A single cigarette passed from man to man can say more than a dozen words. Occasionally, an officer passes through, clipboard in hand, reminding them to save part of the ration for later. The men nod, then finish eating anyway. Experience has taught them that later may not come. Supply chains falter, trucks are delayed, units shift unexpectedly. The army might promise 3 rations a day, but in the field, promises fade like smoke. When the food is gone, they crumple the waxed paper, stow the tins, and scrape their knives clean on the soles of their boots. The ritual ends with the same small act, the folding of the empty box, flattened and tucked into a pocket to keep the fields clear. The discipline of tidiness persists even here, surrounded by chaos. Beyond the orchard, the distant sound of artillery rolls over the landscape. The hedgerows amplify every echo, so it's impossible to tell where the fire comes from. Somewhere ahead, the front line shifts by meters, the slow grind of progress continuing unseen. The men finish their coffee and check their rifles again. The moment of rest is over. In his small notebook, Sergeant Thomas Hall records the day's meal with dry humour. Breakfast, ham, eggs, biscuits, lemon powder, and 2 cigarettes. Lunch, TBD, depending on survival. His handwriting is neat, the lines even. It's the only order he can impose on a world of disorder. The taste of the K-ration never really leaves the mouth, a blend of salt, metal, and faint sweetness from the gum. The texture lingers chalky and dry. The men rinse their mouths with the last of the coffee, swish, and swallow.
No one ever says it tastes good.
But no one forgets it either. The packaging itself becomes a small comfort, the familiarity of it, the clean lines, the printed words. Prepared under the direction of the quartermaster corps, it feels like a connection to something larger and organized, a world beyond the mud and noise. Each box identical, each meal measured and issued, as though order could be maintained by cardboard and tin. By mid-morning, the sun has burned away the mist. The hedgerows glisten with dew. The smell of crushed grass mixes with the faint tang of gun oil. The men move out in single file, helmets low, rifles balanced carefully. The boxes are gone now, the wrappers buried under a thin layer of earth. Only the smell of coffee remains, clinging faintly to the air. At the rear of the column, Sergeant Hall pats his pocket. Inside is a single chocolate bar, wrapped in foil, slightly bent from the heat of his body. It's his ritual 1 bar saved from each ration, carried until the next battle. He tells himself it's for energy, but it's more than that. It's a promise. He glances once at the horizon where the faint pop of small arms fire echoes through the hedgerows. The men ahead are already spreading out, taking cover, the rhythm of movement practiced and silent. He takes a deep breath, adjusts his helmet,
and falls in behind them. The chocolate bar stays in his pocket for after the next firefight, he says, quietly to himself. By the time the sun is directly overhead,
the air in Normandy is thick with heat and flies. The men have been moving through hedgerows since morning, advancing, halting, crawling, then advancing again. Every few hundred yards, another burst of gunfire. Every few minutes, the dull, distant thump of artillery. Meals in this world are never planned. They happen in fragments, a few bites between bursts of noise, a sip of water stolen during a lull. The army may call it dining under combat conditions, but the men simply call it eating between shells. The rations have changed slightly since breakfast. The K-ration boxes are gone. Now they carry C-rations metal cans instead of cardboard, heavier but more durable. Each tin contains a portion of meat or beans, a biscuit pack, and sometimes a small can of fruit. When the shooting starts, the cans clatter inside their packs like dull bells. Lunch begins when the platoon pauses behind a hedgerow, crouched in the shade of tall grass. The sergeant gives a brief nod. That's the signal, a wordless permission to eat if you can. The men settle into the dirt, rifles balanced across their knees. They work open the cans with bayonets, or the small steel P38 openers attached to their dog tags. The clicking sound fills the air, sharp, repetitive, oddly comforting. Inside, the contents are thick and unappealing. Beef and gravy, beans with pork, spaghetti and meatballs, chicken stew. The texture is uniform, the colour somewhere between brown and grey. But to hungry men, it's food. They eat quickly, scooping with spoons or folding crackers into the tin to scrape the sides. Flies gather almost instantly. One man waves them away lazily, too tired to care. The challenge isn't the taste, it's the heat. The cans are cold and greasy, the contents congealed from hours in the shade. If time allows, the men warm them. There are no stoves, no kitchens, only improvisation. Some rest the cans on hot rifle barrels after firing. Others wedge them near the exhaust of idling jeeps, letting the engine heat do the work. The smell of fuel mixes with the faint scent of meat, drifting through the hedgerow like smoke from an invisible fire. When it's raining, and in Normandy it rains, often they use candles. A single stub from a care package can heat a can of beans in 20 minutes. The flame flickers in the wind, protected by helmets turned upside down. The process is slow, but there's comfort in it. The act of waiting feels almost civilized. Occasionally, they trade food with other units or with locals. A farmer's family might appear at the edge of a field, cautious but curious. In exchange for a tin of American coffee or cigarettes, the soldiers receive eggs, onions, or a loaf of coarse bread baked in a farmhouse oven. The taste is astonishing, real food, warm, alive. For a moment the war feels distant. Then someone shouts, "Incoming!" and everyone dives for cover, bread still clutched in their hands. In the foxholes, food becomes communal.
One man opens a can of beans, another a tin of peaches, another a pack of biscuits.
They pass them around carefully, taking turns with a single spoon. There's no ceremony, only quiet efficiency. The sound of chewing blends with the hum of insects and the faint rustle of leaves. Overhead, the occasional shell whistles past, too high to worry about. The men talk as they eat, not about the war, but about food at home. Hamburgers, apple pie, hot dogs from roadside stands. Someone mentions ice cream, and for a few minutes they all discuss flavors: chocolate, vanilla, strawberry. The conversation drifts, unhurried, comforting. Then another shell lands nearby, and the topic vanishes like smoke. They adapt, constantly. Coffee is brewed from whatever heat source is available, a helmet filled with water, placed over a small fire of twigs. The powder dissolves unevenly, leaving black flecks that float on the surface. The taste is bitter, metallic, faintly sweetened with rationed sugar. The men sip it carefully, passing the cup between them. It tastes of home and discipline and endurance. Sometimes, when supplies run low, they barter among themselves. Cigarettes for biscuits, chocolate for fruit, powdered lemonade for coffee. The transactions are wordless, marked by nods.
No one cheats.
Fairness in trade is an unspoken rule. There are stories of men eating cold rations under direct fire, refusing to waste a single bite. One sergeant was said to have balanced a can of beans on his knee during an artillery barrage, spooning it calmly as shrapnel fell nearby. When asked later how he could eat through that, he shrugged. "You stop eating, you stop living," he said, simply. At night, when the fighting pauses and the world turns quiet, the men's thoughts return to food. The sound of opening cans echoes softly in the darkness, mingling with the croak of frogs and the distant rumble of artillery. The glow of a single candle illuminates faces lined with grime and fatigue. Shadows move slowly along the walls of the foxhole. They speak little. The day's noise still rings in their ears, the rhythm of gunfire imprinted in muscle memory. The meal is slow, careful.
A bite of bread, a sip of coffee, a moment to breathe.
The simplicity of it all brings a kind of peace. One private pulls a can of sea-ration stew from his pack and sets it beside a candle flame. The wax burns unevenly, dripping onto the metal. It takes nearly half an hour before steam rises from the lid. He doesn't mind the wait. The warmth feels like luxury. Across the trench, another man unwraps a chocolate bar from its waxed paper, breaking it into small squares. He passes half to his friend without a word. The taste is dull, the texture slightly gritty, but it melts slowly on the tongue, leaving a trace of sweetness that lingers longer than the sound of shells. The war itself feels distant in these moments. The men are surrounded by it, yet separated from it by ritual, the small repeated acts of survival that make each day bearable. Heating a can, sharing a biscuit,
stirring coffee with the tip of a bayonet.
They become patterns of life, reminders of order in a world of noise. The weather changes without warning. A light rain begins, pattering on helmets and gear. The candle sputters, goes out, then flickers back. The men hunch closer together, pulling ponchos over their shoulders, shielding their meager dinner from the drizzle. The sound of raindrops blends with the dull echo of distant artillery. After eating, they bury the cans in shallow holes, careful to cover the reflective metal. The army teaches that clean camps attract fewer flies, fewer rats, fewer diseases. The men obey, not out of discipline, but because it gives them something to do, a simple act that keeps the chaos at bay. After eating, they bury the cans in shallow holes, careful to cover the reflective metal. The army teaches that clean camps attract fewer flies, fewer rats, fewer diseases. The men obey, not out of discipline, but because it gives them something to do, a simple act that keeps the chaos at bay. Later, as the rain stops and the night deepens, the foxhole glows again.
Someone relights the candle.
Its light is faint but steady, throwing soft gold across the mud walls. The men sit shoulder to shoulder, warming their hands near the tiny flame. The candle's heat is just enough to warm one more can. This time it's stew, thick, brown, smelling faintly of onion. They take turns stirring it with a stick, careful not to spill a drop. The sound of laughter rises softly, muffled but real. It's not joy exactly. It's something smaller and more resilient, the quiet humor that keeps men sane in the spaces between fear. Outside, the sky flashes once distant lightning, or perhaps artillery. The ground trembles briefly, then settles. The men glance up, then back to the flame. The stew bubbles faintly, steam curling upward in the still air. They eat in silence again, spoons scraping the bottom of the can, each bite measured, deliberate. The warmth spreads slowly through their hands, their faces, their bones. The sound of distant guns becomes a kind of rhythm, a reminder of the world beyond their small circle of light. When the can is empty, they leave it beside the candle, its sides blackened from the heat. The wax burns low, the flame shrinking. One by one, the men lie back against the dirt, rifles within reach, eyes half closed. Above them, the clouds drift, reflecting faint flashes of light from battles miles away. The air smells of smoke, rain, and coffee. As night falls, they huddle around the last flame, a single sea ration can, heating over a candle. The soft glow flickering on weary faces, their laughter is low and quiet, almost lost beneath the distant rumble of artillery. The summer of 1945 arrives quietly. The fighting is finished now, though the echoes of it remain everywhere in the roads torn by tanks, the fields littered with rusting tins, and the smell of oil that never quite leaves the soil. For the soldiers who survive, life has become a series of new routines, marching home, waiting for ships, standing in lines that finally lead away from the front. In the camps scattered across France, the mess tents serve familiar food once more: real eggs, fresh bread, butter. For the first few days, men eat in near silence, as if afraid the plates will disappear. They eat slowly, methodically, the way they learned to eat between shells, every bite deliberate, nothing wasted. The taste of ordinary food feels foreign. The texture of softness shocks them. Some even miss the discipline of tins and powder, the strange comfort of uniform meals that asked for no decisions. When the men return home, the war follows them in their memories, their habits, and their stomachs. At reunions years later, they laugh about the rations that kept them alive. Someone always brings a preserved K ration box, flattened and faded, a relic from Normandy or the Ardennes. They pass it around like a sacred object, reading the labels aloud: chopped ham and eggs, cheese and bacon, biscuits, compressed. The words sound almost affectionate now. They remember the taste not because it was good, but because it was constant. The metallic tang of canned meat, the chalky crumble of biscuits, the thin sweetness of lemon powder that never fully dissolved. In the midst of chaos, these flavors had been the one predictable thing. Each meal had meant another day survived. At veteran reunions in the 1950s, tables are set with modern canned good soups, beans, luncheon meat, the civilian echoes of army food. The companies that once supplied the military now fill supermarket shelves. Campbell's, Hormel, Nabisco, General Foods. The same machines that packed rations for the 8th Army now sealed tins for American kitchens. The war has ended, but its efficiency lives on in every pantry. Some veterans find comfort in this familiarity. They open a can of Spam and smile at the sound, the small hiss of escaping air, the faint metallic ring.
Others can't bear it.
The smell sends them back to muddy foxholes, to nights of rain and cold.
One man tells his wife he can't eat beans anymore.
Another refuses powdered coffee for the rest of his life. Yet others keep a single ration tin on a shelf, unopened, a reminder of youth and endurance. Historians later call the K ration both a triumph and a failure, ingenious in design, but inadequate in nutrition. For the men who carried it, those words don't matter. They remember what it meant, a meal in a pocket, a link to order amid uncertainty. They remember how it looked when opened in the pale light before battle, and how it felt to share one biscuit between friends. In interviews decades later,
veterans speak about the rations more than they speak about the fighting.
One recalls eating cold meat from a tin during a thunderstorm in Normandy, the sound of rain masking the artillery. Another remembers the first time he tasted chocolate after 3 days without food. A paratrooper says he still keeps sugar cubes in his pocket, just in case. Old habits die slowly when they were learned under fire. The culture of canned food outlives the war itself. America, shaped by rationing and mass production, learns to love the convenience of the can. Meals become mechanical, efficient, preserve the same virtues that kept men alive overseas. Supermarkets proudly advertise army-style durability. Television commercials borrow the language of logistics. Quick, uniform, dependable. In kitchens across the country, families open tins of stew and beans, unaware that the recipes trace their lineage to field rations designed for combat. Powdered drinks, instant coffee, chocolate bars sealed in foil, all find their way into peacetime homes. The war taught industry to feed millions. Peace taught it to sell the memory of reliability. For the veterans, food becomes a bridge between past and present. At backyard barbecues, they tell stories of canned bread and cold coffee, of meals eaten in rain-filled trenches. The younger listeners laugh, thinking it exaggeration. The old men smile and let them believe it. They know the truth, that even the worst meal can taste like life when the alternative is nothing at all. There's nostalgia in their tone, but also distance. Time has softened the edges, turned hardship into routine memory. They remember the small rituals, warming cans on candles, trading cigarettes for biscuits, stirring coffee with bayonet tips. Each act had felt trivial then, but sacred now. Those gestures belonged to another world, one measured not by days, but by rations. Museums begin to collect them, sealed boxes of K rations, tins of Spam, the slim metal openers that once hung from dog tags. Visitors peer through glass at the artifacts of hunger and endurance. Curators describe calories, packaging, and shelf life. Few mention what the soldiers thought when they held those boxes, the quiet gratitude, the faint amusement, the unspoken wish that the next meal would come at all. In one recorded interview from 1984,
an infantryman from the 1st Division is asked what he remembers most about Normandy.
He doesn't mention the beaches or the fighting. He pauses, then says, "The coffee, you'd heat it any way you could, on candles, on guns, even over a fire from a helmet full of mud. It was awful, but it was warm. It told you that you were still alive." The interviewer asks if he's ever tasted anything like it since. He smiles faintly. Not once. In that way, the K ration becomes more than food. It becomes a symbol of endurance, routine, and quiet defiance. It represents the idea that survival can exist without comfort, that normalcy can be built from cardboard and tin. For those who lived through it, the ration box is a small, unspoken medal. It marks the place where necessity and memory meet. Even decades later, some veterans open their garages or attics and find a forgotten box, edges frayed, but contents intact. They lift the lid and see the familiar order inside: meat, biscuits, chocolate, cigarettes. The smell of cardboard and metal rises faintly, dry and sweet. For a moment time folds. They are back in the hedgerows, crouched in the mud, listening for artillery that no longer comes. The modern world has long since moved past rations. Fresh food is plentiful, packaging is bright, flavors are many, yet for a generation of men who once lived by tin and powder, simplicity still holds meaning. A sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a thermos of coffee, a bar of chocolate tucked into a coat pocket, each carries an echo of that old discipline. Eat when you can. Share what you have. Be grateful for warmth. At memorial gatherings, when the speeches end and the music fades, veterans sometimes raise small paper cups filled with coffee. They drink in silence, not to toast victory, but to honor the ordinary. No medals, no speeches, just the quiet act of remembrance that tastes faintly of chicory and tin. For many of them, memory itself comes in flavors. The sourness of lemon powder, the sharp salt of tinned meat, the dryness of crackers that turn to dust on the tongue, and above all, the faint, waxy taste of chocolate carried too long in a pocket. Each flavor tied not to comfort, but to survival. In a sense, the war never really ended for their senses. It lived on in the way they stirred sugar into coffee, the way they saved leftovers, the way they counted what was left before every meal. Old habits born of scarcity carried into abundance, a quiet testimony to what it took to endure. When asked, years later, what victory tasted like, few of them mention champagne or celebration. Most smile and say the same thing. It tasted of coffee brewed from powder, of biscuits soaked in muddy water, of meat from a can shared with a friend in the dark. For many veterans, the faint taste of tinned cheese became the flavor of victory itself, bland but unforgettable.